Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Helen took a long, hard look at her own reflection in the dressing room mirror. But it was still noticeable that her body had become white, as if gravity was inexorably pulling her to the ground. In the bright light of the spotlight, the woman's face looked tired and haggard, dark circles under her eyes, and the already visible wrinkles were a treacherous reminder of her age. Helen would have turned 47 this Saturday, and age was a painful subject for the woman. She managed to maintain her attractiveness, looked after herself, buying expensive cosmetics, regularly visiting a beautician and a gym. But all this masked only the external side. In her heart, Helen felt that a little more and old age will jump out at her like a hooligan from the alley, intent on taking away the most valuable beauty and happiness. The forthcoming celebration frightened her to 40. The woman did not feel any special changes, but the closer the hand got to 50, the more she felt the destructive power of time. Benjamin would probably say it's too much of a drag, thought Helen, imagining her husband's reaction to the outfit. The hell with it. I like it. I feel attractive in this dress. Her husband was 4 years younger than her. Helen and Benjamin had been married for 20 years. During that time, all sorts of things happened. Family life was quite prosperous by the standards of society. Husband and wife lived in prosperity, rarely conflicted. They gave birth and brought up a beautiful son. Of course, over time, feelings faded, but Helen was satisfied that she was faithful to her spouse. And he never really looked at other women. She had once been madly in love with Benjamin. Her parents discouraged her from marrying a young man who was just graduating from college. But she wouldn't listen. Passion literally consumed the girl, making her forget about all the fans, which her father considered very promising. Mom said that Benjamin only needs money. Who is he? A provincial boy living in a dormitory on a tiny scholarship. And she's a beautiful girl from a good family, with an apartment in the center and a prestigious position. At 26, Helen didn't care about other people's opinions. She was head over heels in love with a smiling and modest guy who dedicated poems to her, met her every day from work, and gave her modest bouquets bought on a new scholarship. Romance surrounded Helen's head, and then she got pregnant suddenly and stupidly. She flatly refused to get rid of the baby. At a family meeting, her parents decided they needed to organize a wedding immediately. Immediately, their prejudice against the beau disappeared. Helen's personal reputation was paramount. It was a happy decision. Benjamin was at first very surprised, but showed himself as a decent man and willingly took the girl as his wife. The wedding was lavish. Helen's parents were ready to spend any money as long as their daughter did not need anything. Benjamin resisted at first, insisting on a simple registration. He took a night job to earn money for the rings, but Helen's parents were adamant their only daughter should be married. The ceremony had to match, but Benjamin insisted on the rings. Even then, he was able to show a strong, principled attitude. That's what eventually won over his future father-in-law. When Bobby was born, Helen realized what true happiness was. Her son became everything to her. The girl did not want to leave the maternity leave for a long time, trying to spend as much time as possible with the child. Benjamin, even jealous of her, blamed her for forgetting about her husband. But Helen only guffawed and continued to pamper her baby. While Bobby was growing up, Helen continued to work. Together with Benjamin, they opened their own firm. The business began with goods for children. The mother believed that so she will be easier to combine pleasant with useful, trying on her son most of the goods: clothing, toys, furniture, and school supplies. Gradually, the couple's enterprise grew. As their son grew up, the assortment of goods expanded. Helen had a flair for what would certainly be in demand, and Benjamin discovered a real talent for management. He personally conducted interviews, selecting promising employees to join his staff. He conducted important negotiations personally, winning over contractors with his business acumen. After a few years together, they were able to turn a small family business into a large, successful business. They opened several chain stores of children's goods. The couple's wealth grew. Bobby grew up, and it seemed that nothing could prevent the happiness of the spouses. However, when their son turned 14, Helen realized that not everything was so smooth. The marriage of many years had lost its harmony. Benjamin stopped seeing her as a woman. Helen felt this very well. Rare moments of intimacy with her husband for a while made her forget about emotional problems. But more and more often the woman thought that Benjamin has another woman. She repeatedly tried to expose her spouse, but either Benjamin skillfully concealed the connection on the side or did not have it at all. As all suspicions of the wife did not find confirmation. Soon Helen abandoned attempts to expose the allegedly unfaithful spouse. But life from this did not become better. With each day, the woman felt that she was losing her former attractiveness. In the 5th decade, Helen began to actively monitor herself. She joined a gym, found a great beautician, and regularly updated her closet. When she came to parent-teacher conferences at school, she more than once caught the admiring glances of fathers, classmates, and her son. But even this could not raise her self-esteem, so mercilessly trampled by the indifference of her beloved husband. The woman's whole life revolved between home and work. In the past, she could find an outlet in raising Bobby. But her son was growing up, and he needed his mother's attention less and less. Bobby ended up going to university in another city and left, leaving her all alone. Benjamin stayed long hours at work. He opened a new branch, which he decided to develop on his own, without letting his wife, who had enough to do. On the eve of his 40th birthday, Helen realized that her life is unbearably boring and monotonous. But she could not do anything about it. Having decided to buy a dress, the woman went shopping for shoes. She had not worn stilettos for a long time, and for some reason now she wanted to add them to the purchased outfit. The woman had chosen a pair of slim, high-heeled ankle boots that looked spectacular on her slender legs. To think of it, Helen sighed to herself, 47. I had never realized that old age was creeping up so stealthily. Soon I'll have to buy orthopedic shoes, not stiletto shoes. Grimly grinned the woman. Headed to the car, obediently sat down a little around the city and drove to a couple more places. Helen returned home. The apartment habitually greeted her with silence. While sorting out her purchases, the woman discovered that she had forgotten to buy coffee. Without this drink, she did not think of herself at all. And at home, as a pity, the supply ran out. In the morning, we'll have to go out again. Helen thought, well, I'll go now, otherwise I'll hear everything from Benjamin in the morning. I taught him to have coffee. There's nothing to complain about. We'll sort out the bags later, just like she did. The husband couldn't wake up unless he had a cup of fragrant hot drink made by his wife in the morning. Options from the coffee shop from Fall. For some reason, the husband only recognized Helen's brews. It was her pleasure. The tradition remained one of the few that brought the couple together, even if not for an extended period of time. Helen didn't bother to take the automobile. Not far from their home was a small store that sold starter tea and coffee. The woman liked this shop. Here she was always greeted like an old acquaintance, advised on new products, and treated to chocolate. Helen didn't buy it, buying everything the shopkeepers offered, as if guessing her personal preferences. When she entered the store, she did not see behind the counter already familiar Wendy long ago. It is an elegant woman, worked from the day of opening for 8 years, no less. Helen had even always wondered when that one would have a shift so she could get a consultation just from her. So well their tastes matched. Instead of an elderly lady with immaculate hairstyle on her gray hair, an unfamiliar man stood near the cash register. What a handsome man. Helen remarked to herself, admiring the military dressing of the salesman, who very successfully emphasized the light gray suit three-piece. He should be on the catwalk, not behind the counter. The man smiled pleasantly at the woman who entered. Good evening. His voice was as good as his appearance. Deep, velvet clear. What can I do for you? Hello, Helen didn't answer at once, continuing to admire the stranger. I need coffee. Usually Wendy has been working with me for a long time, but she's probably having a day off. Galachka is sick, the salesman replied with sincere regret in his voice. It's nothing, a seasonal cold. You see, the weather outside is so changeable. I will replace it for now. My name is Nick. Helen, for some reason, just introduced herself as a woman. A very nice woman. Likewise, ma'am. So what can I do for you? I need coffee. Helen started again. I take regular Arabica. Wendy always recommends what she drinks herself and always hits the mark. Nick rubbed his chin. I think I know what to surprise you with it. Just this morning, new varieties came in from Yemen. Do you drink Arabic coffee? I do, Helen answered him uncertainly. A man's smile. And without a gun, the woman seemed to have lost all thoughts of the hot dark. I wish. Otherwise my husband will not recognize the other one. Are you married? Nick's question seemed strange for some reason. Why is it surprising that she, Helen, is married? Yes, she answered. And you make your own coffee? The salesman smiled. Of course I am, as they say. A fan, I cannot without coffee. And not just waking up, but just a cup in the morning has become a ritual for me. Benjamin has a family tradition of drinking just to wake up. It's important for me to savor the moment, you know. Of course I understand, Nick nodded. Coffee isn't just a morning drink for me either. And what I do has already made those aromatic beans a true deity. Helen took another look at her interlocutor. Her age, maybe a couple years older. The suit was expensive, though simple. You couldn't buy such a thing on a consultant's salary. Looks well-groomed. Manicure alone. And the watch, Helen. Nick interrupted her musings. I think I found what you're looking for. It's dark, roasted, very strong aromatic flavor, a nutty note. Is that what you like? Wendy would sell her soul for one of these. Only 2 packs came in. It's pretty rare and expensive. But I'll give you a good discount. Come on, Helen answered hesitantly. For some reason, she felt insecure in the company of this man. I see your uncertainty, smiled Nick. Why don't we try it? Let's have an espresso. Helen was often treated to coffee here. It was normal for a store of this caliber to give a customer a tasting. But for some reason, Nick's offer confused the woman. Thank you very much for the offer, she began in a changing tone. But unfortunately, I don't have time. My husband has to come back. I don't want to be late. The boss is the boss, Nick replied nonchalantly. Although I think 5 minutes will not decide anything. Will you say you're stuck in traffic? For some reason, Helen desperately wanted to accept the offer. She didn't understand why. She saw some hidden hint in the mundane tasting procedure. Perhaps it was the fact that she liked the man. She had never really examined the opposite sex since she had a husband. But now some old memories were shifting in her soul about the crowds of admirers who had followed her before she was married. How beautifully they had courted her, asked her out. Okay, Helen agreed. Let's have your espresso. Great, the man smiled again. Double with sugar. Double. Helen agreed. But no sugar. Nick nodded. He invited Helen to go to the back of the room where the tasting area was located. A huge coffee machine shone with chrome. The woman sat down in a comfortable chair, and the salesman busied himself making coffee. As he made the beans for us, a magical aroma enveloped the space. We could clearly feel some unfamiliar oriental notes. It smells delicious, said Helen, sniffing the air with her nose. Yes, it's a good flavor. Will you try some more now? You will buy the whole stock from us at once. I must warn you right away. There are only 2 packs on sale. This is the 3rd, but only for personal enjoyment. You're welcome to come in. I'll make you coffee. South. Helen blushed. It seemed to her that the man was flirting with her. There was nothing unusual in his proposal, but the woman felt that there was something behind the words. Dano. She tried to shake off those thoughts. It's just a courtesy. It's his job to attract customers, so he's trying. And I'm an idiot. All this romance. I think I'm about to turn 50, and still like a girl. Everything's ready. Nick interrupted her inner dialogue. Here you go. He put a tiny cup with an aromatic espresso on the table in front of Helen. The drink was black, thick, and smelled wonderful. Helen brought the cup to her lips and took a sip. God, she exclaimed. This is fantastic, just the way I like it. And it even tastes like walnuts. That's right, Nick nodded. So our taste buds are in sync. I thought I smelled walnuts too. Also, notice how the texture is not pure thick. I put a standard serving in the holder though. Very tasty, thanked Helen, placing the empty cup on the table and wiping her lips with a napkin. You were right. I'll take everything I've got, and I can only sell you one packet. What do you mean? Helen was surprised. You said you had two. I wouldn't want to miss out on such a great opportunity, so I'll sell you one. The man spoke softly. When it is finished, you will come for the second one, which will be waiting only for you. Otherwise, you'll be in for a long time. I wouldn't mind meeting you again. Helen felt herself blushing again. This time, Nick was flirting openly. Of course, she was pleased with the attention. But the image of Benjamin immediately appeared in front of her eyes. All right, after some thought, the woman agreed. She wanted to see the man again. There was something unbearably attractive in his mannerisms. And you work here now. I just haven't seen you before. I've always worked here. The man laughed. I don't usually stand behind the counter. Oh yeah? Well, I'll be sure to. I'll stop by soon. And now, excuse me, I have to go. I can't keep you any longer, sighed Nick. If I'm not in the room when you make your next visit, ask the checker or whoever's behind the counter to call me. Okay, I will, smiled Helen. See you soon. Have a good day. I'll be waiting. On the way home, Helen was overcome with thoughts that the man was not getting out of her head. She wanted to go back to the cozy store and continue the conversation. Alas, it was something from the category of improbable. When Helen entered the apartment, the smell of cigarette smoke hit her nose. Apparently, Benjamin was home, though he rarely showed up at this hour. Entering the kitchen, Helen found Benjamin in a foul mood. Well, where do you go? He grumbled unhappily. The bags are lying around. You haven't even sorted them out. You don't meet your husband. A cow. Helen began to justify herself. She did not like the tone of her husband. He rarely took to her, much less reproached her with anything. His usual state was one of complete indifference. I went for coffee, I realized it was all over coffee. There's a store just a stone's throw away. You're telling me you spent an hour choosing? Or even longer? I'm the one who got here an hour ago. You're saying something like that? Helen didn't expect her hike to be so long. Apparently, she chatted with Wendy too. She didn't advertise the new variety. Take a look at this. Benjamin pushed the outstretched packet away. Helen was surprised by his reaction. But she was even more surprised that she didn't tell the truth, but referred to her chat with Wendy. Drink it yourself, Benjamin said gruffly. Are you often so different in the evenings? Your husband's not home and you go out. Benjamin, what are you talking about? Have I ever given any reason to think so? You know I don't go anywhere but work, and I know it. I left the office 2 hours early today, husband said with a squint. I wasn't going to hide it from you, Helen replied in a conciliatory tone. I went to buy a dress. Saturday is a holiday, remember? There was nothing to do. So I decided to seize the moment. And with what regularity do you go dress shopping like that? Darling, do you suspect me of something? Helen wondered. Just say so. You and I are getting pretty big. In 20 years, have I ever given you reason to doubt my fidelity? It happens. Helen people live together longer and then get divorced. It's like nothing ever happened. Divorce. Helen was trying to figure out what her husband was getting at. I don't understand. Are you getting a divorce? No, of course not, Helen. Suddenly, the husband softened his tone. I'm tired. I'm just angry that you're not home. I came home early, you know. Never mind, I'm sorry. Come on, show me your dress. No way, Helen smiled. I want it to be a surprise. I can only show it in a bag so you don't think anything. Benjamin didn't like the sarcasm in his wife's tone, but he decided not to say anything. Suddenly, his phone rang. Hastily picking up the phone from the table, Benjamin dropped the call and put the smartphone down for some reason. Helen, don't take offense at me, he began. I have to go again now. You see, they're calling. They won't let me go. Okay, shrugged Helen, not lingering. Only I'm going to cook dinner now. I'll try to do it in a couple of hours. Well, don't miss me here. That was quite a party. To celebrate his wife's birthday, Benjamin rented the luxurious Medusa restaurant. There were so many guests that Helen felt she didn't even get a chance to say hello to everyone. The women showered her with flowers, compliments. One thing that was disappointing was that there were no really close friends. Most of the invitees were colleagues. Helen had long ago gotten used to the fact that she had no girlfriends. Benjamin had involuntarily cut off from her all the girls with whom she had once socialized. Of course, there were still some friends, but it was inappropriate to share her worries with them. Helen had a lot to worry about. As expected, Benjamin criticized her outfit. He reproached his wife for choosing an age-inappropriate dress. He was used to seeing Helen either in strict suits, in which she worked, or in comfortable home clothes. The woman did not wear dresses, favoring more practical options. Just before leaving for the restaurant, when Helen came out of the bedroom showing her husband a gorgeous dark green evening gown, Benjamin started a conflict. Benjamin tried to calm her husband down. "Helen, I don't understand why you're getting lost in everything these days. What's wrong with me wearing a nice dress? It's all for your pleasure. I only go to the gym for you. Every husband should be flattered to have an attractive wife. Am I wrong?" And they each cut Benjamin off. "It's so blatant. You know, it's fine that it'll be almost all men there. Well, let them look and envy that you have such a beautiful wife." Helen tried to smile. "Are you already old for such outfits?" roughly answered her husband. Helen felt her cheeks flare up. Tears even came to her eyes. It was the first time Benjamin had spoken so directly about her age. Trying to keep her composure, Helen walked into the hallway and began to put on her shoes. "Benjamin, let's go. The guests are already waiting." "Helen, are you offended?" "I told the truth." "She's not offended by the truth. We should have paid for the trip together." "Benjamin, stop it, please. Could you be a little more tactful? Let's not spoil the mood before the holiday." After drinking another glass of champagne, Helen felt relaxed enough. She tried not to think about her husband's words. All the more he tried to rehabilitate himself by giving her a present. The presentation was a luxurious necklace with emeralds. As Benjamin said, very successfully emphasizing Helen's eyes, such a gift, probably everyone would be happy. But Helen felt sad for some reason. She had nowhere to wear such a piece of jewelry, just like everything else her husband had given her earlier. From jewelry, Helen wore only a wedding ring and elegant earrings, which her husband gave her at the wedding. All the jewelry, which she had accumulated quite a lot, was in the bank safe until better times. As the folk saying goes, a gift to a horse in the teeth does not look in the teeth. But Helen would be much happier with a practical gift. And most of all, she dreamed of going to a resort with her husband. The last time they had gone to a resort was about 5 years ago. Helen repeatedly hinted to Benjamin that it would be nice to repeat their resort romance. But the husband remained deaf to her requests or tried to pretend not to understand. When the couple returned home, Benjamin immediately went to bed. The man drank a lot, so Helen did not even begin to demand attention from him. She changed her clothes, made herself a strong coffee. But without taking a sip, she fell asleep on the kitchen couch. The bell rang, waking Helen up. It took her a long time to realize where she was. Gradually, the woman came to her senses. The doorbell continued to ring insistently. Her head was telling, and the champagne she had drunk the night before was telling. Helen looked at the clock, 11:34. Jesus! The woman was surprised. She'd overslept. Obviously, her husband wasn't home. Surely Benjamin had left early and would not wake his wife, sleeping peacefully in the kitchen. It was Helen's day off, and she wasn't going anywhere. And Benjamin had to go to a meeting with some partner. She remembered that too. The bell rang all 3 times. Who's being so persistent? Helen said aloud, heading for the door. "Who is it?" "I'm here to see Benjamin." A girl's voice sounded from behind the door. "He's not home." Helen hesitated. "He's at work. Call him, please." The woman was about to move away from the door, but the callers were not going to give up. "Wait," echoed the girl. "And you, Helen?" Yes, the woman was embarrassed. "Then I'm here to see you. Open up, please. We need to talk." Helen hesitated, wondering what this lady wanted. How did she know Benjamin and herself? But curiosity got the best of her. Helen opened the door. On the doorstep stood a very young girl in her early 20s. She had a smug smile on her brightly painted, pretty face that gave her a predatory look. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" Helen asked. The guest gave her a displeased look and smirked. I think we should continue this conversation off the doorstep. I have a lot to say. Good. The landlady was embarrassed. Come into the living room. She led the stranger into the room and sat her down in an armchair. Helen wanted to offer her something, as the norms of hospitality demanded, but for some reason she hesitated. Helen, I'm sorry, I don't know my middle name. The girl said in an insolent tone. Can I just say Helen? Helen resented the girl's behavior. She sat back in her chair with her foot on her leg, and a strand of hair twirled insolently around her finger. My name is Emily, the guest continued. I am Benjamin's favorite woman. Silence reigned in the room. Helen digested here. To say that Emily's statement surprised her was incorrect. The woman had long ago guessed that Benjamin had taken a mistress. Constant delays at work, sudden mood swings of some kind. Details only she could see. The hunch was confirmed, but Helen couldn't call it a blow. Somehow she didn't care whether Benjamin had a mistress or not. The feelings between them had long since faded. There was not enough information to perceive her husband's act as a betrayal. It was more outrageous that this insolent girl had come here, to their apartment, and was smirking. As if she'd won a victory. What are you saying? Helen pretended to be surprised. And how, I wondered, did you realize that Benjamin loved you? What is there to realize? Emily was surprised. Ben and I have been together for a long time. Oh yes, you didn't realize anything. Why did you come? Helen asked tiredly, interrupting her interlocutor. What do you mean, why? Benjamin has wanted a divorce for a long time. He prepared the documents, but he's so indecisive, you know. So I thought I'd speed up the process by telling you. Girl, do you really think that my husband is serious? Helen grinned. Well, he took a mistress. Is that a reason to divorce? But he's going out with you and he'll come back. We've been together 20 years. We have a son. In vain think that a man is so easily ready to give up the usual family life and family life. Emily laughed. What kind of life is that? Have you seen yourself? Old, boring. What can you give him? He said himself that he didn't want to go home with his wife just out of pity. He comes straight to my place after work, and I can make sure he doesn't get bored. I'm sure you can. Helen was amazed at her calmness. At another time, she would have kicked this girl's face out. But now she was even curious how this dialogue would end. And in vain you think that we are not serious. Emily continued. By the way, Benjamin even bought me an apartment. Doesn't that say something about his intentions? Hardly a man would give such a gift to a woman he doesn't care about. Helen was silent for a long time, looking at Vika. Such a broad gesture from her husband seemed something indecent. Emily was right. For a one-night stand, Benjamin would hardly have splurged. Yes, he liked to let dust in the eyes, but most likely would be limited to expensive, but not binding jewelry. An apartment is more serious. Such an expensive gift hinted at certain intentions. It was strange that such a large sum had escaped her attention. Helen was not particularly interested in finances, trusting the management of them to her husband. Apparently for nothing. Well, she said with a sigh, I don't know what you want. If you need to sign the divorce papers, let's wait for Benjamin and talk it over. If you think I'm gonna hold him back, you're wrong. If you think I'm just gonna let him go, you're wrong too. You obviously want money from my husband, and you're trying to convince me that you're in love with him. He's twice your age, and if he's understandable, bought into the beautiful wrapping, ready to listen to any lie, just to not slip off the hook. I understand you much better. Successful businessman. Obviously he's rich, and you can spin him any way you want. How can you not take a chance? And the wife's a bore. Hired old lady to the wedding. Make way for the young. So Emily, I can see right through you. Even the fact that you allow yourself this apartment speaks volumes. Am I the only one who wonders if Benjamin realizes you're motivated purely by mercantile motives? Are you wrong? Emily replied hotly. You can say what you want, but he and I really love each other. It's just that you've forgotten what real feelings and passion are. You went into work with your head, devoted yourself not to your husband, but to business, not even realizing that he has his own needs and desires. I can give him all that. I bet you can. Helen replied gloatingly. You probably don't work anywhere. You are ready to sit on the neck of a gullible man as long as he provides. Wrong. I've been working for a month. I'm acting as Benjamin's personal assistant. In fact, he's building the new branch entirely for me. Appointing me director is ridiculous, Helen smiled. How old are you? 23. Proudly declared the girl. Here's the thing, Emily. If you think that a left face is enough to manage a branch, you are very wrong. I've been in this business for over 15 years, and even that's not enough to avoid mistakes. If what you say is true, I can only sympathize with Ben, who puts so much effort into this business. What makes you think I don't have a brain? By the way, I got a good education, and I have business acumen. I have experience. But now everything is not as it was 15 years ago. It's enough to know how to use the internet and talk to people. What are you saying? Helen's sarcastic. And smart and beautiful from the money does not hunt for money. She's a treasure. Here's the thing, sweetheart. If what you're trying to convince me of is true, which I personally highly doubt, if you be so kind as to spare me your company, I'll talk to my husband tonight, but you mustn't come here again. I want to hear about the divorce from him, not from a stranger who wears rose-colored glasses. Emily stood up and flared up unhappily. It was noticeable that she had expected a different reaction. Scandals, tantrums, not indifferent appraisals. Good night, Helen. And I advise you to go to the salon if you intend to try to keep Boria. Because trying to persuade her husband not to go to his mistress is worth at least not in this form. You know, Emily suddenly decided to add, Helen, thank you for your advice, but I'll do my own thing. And as for your big feeling, before you expect material support from my husband, at least ask where he gets his money from. I didn't want to tell you. Since you're in love, it shouldn't matter. But Benjamin will get nothing after the divorce. As she crossed the threshold, the girl stopped abruptly. She hadn't expected to hear such information, and now she thought Helen was just mocking her, trying her best to get rid of her rival. In a way, she asked, perplexed, what difference does it make? Helen replied ironically, you're not interested in money, are you? Why worry about it? Helen saw the look on her face, reflected a whole gamut of emotions from distrust to anger. The girl stood squinting, trying to figure out if the cheating wife was telling her the truth. I'm just curious, mumbled Vanya. Just wondering how you are going to take away from Ben what belongs to him. By right. He owns only his monthly salary and half of this apartment. The rest, alas, sweetie, belongs not even to me, but to our son. The day Bobby came of age, all the assets of the company were transferred. So if I were you, you'd be wise to try to spin him instead of Benjamin. Only my son would have the sense not to mess with such a money-hungry predator. With those words, Helen slammed the door shut. Her body trembled despite the coldness she wanted to maintain in front of Vic. The emotions inside were raging. The woman did not know whether she was more outraged by her husband's infidelity, her own age, which was so directly pointed out by her mistress, or her insolence. That and the girls are so calm for those who appeared in her house. Trying to quiet the wiring of her heart in her chest, Helen went to the bathtub. Once again, the mirror appeared in front of her, urging her to face the truth. The gripped hair, the rash, the makeup, the crumpled face. A homemade suit, such a set of reflections greeted Helen, answering. Yesterday was her 47th birthday. Perhaps, Helen thought, running her fingertips over her face. She'd visit the beautician today, though why it's all more obvious now is no longer interesting. Not even mad at him, although I should be. The boudoir, sighing, began Helen. When she returned home in the evening, her husband settled down on the couch. I need to ask you something. What is it, Helen? I'm tired. Can we put it off for later? Reluctantly, the husband replied, staring at the screen of his phone. It could be later, but I think it's important. Benjamin took his eyes off the phone and looked at his wife carefully. They hadn't spoken much lately. He noted to himself that Helen looked very nice today, wearing a cozy, homemade sweater, very similar to the one she had worn when they had first met. Then Benjamin could not take his eyes off the girl and immediately decided that he saw his future wife in front of him. Despite all the obstacles, the difference in status and objections of Helen's relatives. He proved to everyone that he was worthy to be with her. Of course, the years had taken their toll on his wife, but she was still attractive. Benjamin did not know whether he still loved her or not. During the years they spent together, his wife had become so familiar to him that he no longer perceived her as an object of passion. While the man's son was growing up, he never thought of looking at other women. But everything changed when Bobby moved away. Benjamin realized that he had no common interests left with his spouse. Any conversation was reduced to business or domestic matters. He blamed himself for not seeing her as a woman anymore, but only as a wife. Marriage turned into an unbearable habit. So the man started looking for a relationship on the side. Benjamin, tell me. Helen suddenly interrupted his thoughts. You don't love me anymore? What makes you think that? Benjamin was worried. Of course I do. You're my wife. I'm a woman, dear. Women are good at sensing that. Don't be silly. If you're talking about intimacy, well, we're not young enough to get a lot of privacy. Often. Helen was outraged. Do you even remember the last time we slept together? I'm tired, Helen, said her husband. You know this new branch is draining me of all my energy. And not just him, the woman muttered under her breath. What are you talking about, Benjamin? Tell me honestly. You have another woman. What kind of nonsense? Her husband tried to persuade her. What other woman? I wouldn't even have time for an affair on the side. I asked, and I'm not saying a word. I'm married to you and work. I have no other women. Is that so? Helen thought about it. And what about divorce? His wife's behavior surprised Benjamin. Why did she suddenly bring it up? Does she suspect something? What divorce? She's crazy. We've been together for 20 years. What's wrong with you? I'm fine with it. But apparently you're not. Why do you tell me what you're driving at? I had a conversation today. Helen replied tiredly to Emily. Benjamin dazed. How could Helen have crossed paths with Emily? He gave no reason for suspicion. The wife could not have known about the mistress. That's a fact. With Emily? Benjamin asked uncertainly. Now he realized that Helen knew something, and, judging by her questions, she knew everything. Yes, with Emily, of course I understand, darling. But I think it was a mistake for her to come to our house and say all these things. Benjamin realized he'd been caught red-handed, and it seemed silly to back out. But why the hell did Emily come here? They'd agreed she'd stay out of his personal space. Benjamin quietly buried. Benjamin, the wife continued. This girl said that you are seriously thinking about divorce. Got the papers ready already. That's true. And bought her an apartment. Do you have love as a witness that you listened to the ravings of this fool? What divorce? What apartment? Yes, I cheated, I confess. It's nothing serious, Helen, is it? You know, you and I have always been honest with each other. I've never given you a reason to be jealous, and neither have you. I just don't understand why you didn't talk to me. Why would you hide all this? And what would you let me do? You mean sleep with another woman? No, of course not. But we would have talked about what's wrong with you. I don't know. Find a way out. She told me you're with me out of pity, Benjamin. It's true. I realize that youth is gone, but you and I loved each other. Have I been wrong all these years? No, you weren't, sighed your husband tiredly. I do not know how to explain it. It's hormones, I guess, or something else. When I met this girl, I couldn't resist. A gray hair in my beard, as they say. Of course you couldn't resist, Helen quipped. Juicy girls, enterprising. She swears she's in love, doesn't she? You should have seen her face when I told her you don't have any money. It all belongs to you. Are you really that stupid to believe Ben's sweet talk? She's a gold digger. I can't rule out that a young girl might have feelings for you, but the chances of that are slim. Benjamin didn't know what to say. He really thought that Emily loved him. He still looked great, had a broad outlook, and could easily carry on any conversation. Emily always said that his money did not interest her. Never asked for anything, not even an apartment. Benjamin just felt sorry for the girl who had to live in a tiny room. It seemed to him that he was in love as much as in his youth. A couple of meetings as if imperceptibly turned into a stormy Bobby, which he could hardly hide from his wife. Of course, there was no question of divorce. Benjamin did not want to lose either of the two women, as he had grown very accustomed to one and literally idolized the other. And as an employee, Emily showed herself well, easily solving work issues, able to negotiate with harmful clients. He only started talking about divorce to get her to calm down. It was probably standard practice. Who would have thought she'd be stupid enough to show up here and spill everything to his wife? The little brown girl stood him up again. Helen out of contemplation. Look, you know I'm a non-conflict person and I'm always ready to compromise. If you think there's nothing more between us, I'll accept that. But living under the same roof with you will be a misery. I'll sign the necessary papers, the deadline, and I'll explain myself. I don't want to spoil the boy's life with other people's problems. You're probably expecting a scandal from me, but there won't be. Apparently, the time limit on our marriage has come to an end. I want you to be happy. Helen was silent. Ben thought she had tears in her eyes. He did not dare to start talking again, but it was unbearable to sit in silence. Helen, he began, I don't want a divorce. I'll break up with Emily tomorrow, I promise. I don't want her. It's been some kind of a lunatic frenzy. I'm sorry, tomorrow, the wife grinned. Why, I wonder, not today. Borka doesn't torment me. I realize that even if not Emily, there will be another, followed by a third and a fourth. It's like a thrill that won't stop. I don't want to suspect you, accuse you. If you want to be free, I'll stay out of your way. You say that. Suddenly, Benjamin changed tactics. It's so easy for you to go along with all this. It's like you've been waiting for an excuse to get divorced. And now this fool has paid a visit. Helen, I think you're seeing someone else. Don't be ridiculous. His wife cut him off. How can you suspect me of anything? You know very well how and what I live. And unlike you, I don't neglect the house. For 20 years, I didn't even think about other men. And you dare to make assumptions like that. I think it's all about you unwittingly shifting your guilt onto me, and you're right about something. It's my fault for not looking after myself enough. Although with money, you can keep up appearances. But it's not even about wrinkles or anything. I'm tired of seeing you tired. You shut me out. When was the last time you gave me flowers for no reason? You don't like flowers, do you? That's not the point. Flowers are a sign of attention. It's always nice to get a bouquet. Do you like it or not? Tell me, why did you give me that necklace yesterday? Just to keep it in the safe. You knew I wanted to go on vacation with you and not alone. You just didn't want it. So you decided to get away with another expensive piece of bling. We have to admit that we don't love each other anymore. And if you keep insisting that you don't want a divorce, I'm the one who's bringing it up now. Benjamin, are we getting a divorce? Helen, he tried to calm me down. Don't say that. What divorce? Well, I went left. It's not the end of the world. Almost all men cheat. I'm not trying to make excuses. But did you really think I'd go for that girl? What a mess. Where do you want to go? Screamed Helen. You stubbornly refused to hear me. You think I'm just gonna forget and start over? No, I don't. I've told you my position. Why continue something that has no purpose? We have a beautiful son. Our business is thriving. But without mutual trust, I don't want to continue with you. And you lied to me. If you just come clean, we could have had a dialogue. You know very well that I value honesty above all else. And when the person closest to you lies to you, it's a stab in the back. I can't trust you anymore. Even if we agree on something, sooner or later, suspicion will set in. We're adults. We can work this out amicably. If you're afraid of losing your firm, then drop it. We'll continue to do business as before. This job means a lot to me and to you. Can you keep the apartment? I'll go to my parents'. It's empty anyway. You see, I'm not claiming anything. You can live as you like. Listen to me. Benjamin hasn't given up hope. What does this have to do with apartments and business? I don't want to lose you. You don't? Helen was surprised. Then you decided to seek comfort in the arms of another woman. You haven't even tried to talk to me once. There's always a way out. You've lost the passion to try to rekindle it. You've stopped sharing what's on your mind with me. We're not strangers. But why is it so hard for you to do the simple things? No, honey, I'm sorry, but I've made a decision. I can't live with you anymore. Whatever you want, you don't have to sign it. We have an adult child, so we'll be divorced without your consent." "Helen, the sheet is already cold," laughed the wife. "And so are you." With these words, she went into the bedroom, slamming the door defiantly. Benjamin tried to talk for some time, but the woman remained deaf to his pleas. Helen desperately wanted to pamper herself. A week had passed since the argument with her husband. She moved into her parents' apartment, taking only the necessities. She had no intention of straying from her path. The very next day, the woman, after consulting with her lawyer, filed for divorce. As it turned out, the consent of the spouse was not required. The process was scheduled for October. Husband and wife were given 2 months to reconcile. But Helen knew very well that it would not happen. No matter what tricks Benjamin tried. The day was hot, which was unusual for the end of August. Now it would be time to go to a resort, the woman sighed to herself. Could Coral by herself? Get a resort, Bobby, get her mind off things and just relax. The thought struck her as unfortunate, and so she headed to the nearest travel agency to purchase a trip. She was met at the travel agency by a pleasant, middle-aged woman with an immaculate smile. She introduced herself as Maria, listened to all the wishes of the potential client, and got to work. Helen was served aromatic tea and cookies so that she would not be bored while Maria was selecting tours. "Are you sure you don't want to go abroad?" the agent asked. "Now it's time to fly to Thailand or Bali. The rainy season is just over." "Weather? Chick?" "No," Helen smiled. "I want to go to the East Coast for some reason. It's a mental whim, some kind of nostalgia." Helen often remembered how she and Benjamin had traveled to the East Coast when they were young. He always found deserted beaches where they could behave without embarrassment until Bobby was born. The lovers traveled often. But even after the arrival of the baby, they regularly traveled abroad, changing the direction of hot resorts to hospitable and comfortable in all respects. Europe to something native forever remained in Helen's memory something special. She realized that a lot of things would remind her of her husband, but her soul was inexplicably drawn to those places. "Florida?" Maria asked. "I can recommend some wonderful hotels. There's one that's like a guest house, very cozy, but upscale. It's in Miami. My husband and I vacationed there last year. We had the best time. They have their own beach, few guests, for 3 families only. The complex is designed. The owners are very good. Now just the velvet season on the nose. You will not regret it." "Yes, interesting," agreed Helen. "Let's have a look." The women together looked at the pictures of the rooms and the territory belonging to the hotel. Helen liked the style of the grounds and guest houses, the abundance of blooming greenery and the private beach. It looked unparalleled, and Maria claimed that the hotel was much better in person. "Well, Helen agreed to trust you. I haven't been on vacation for a long time, and now I have to go alone. So I have my doubts. You certainly will not regret." Helen made a tour for the beginning of September. At first, she wanted to rent the house for a week, but after thinking about it, she settled on 2. During that time, things at the office were unlikely to get up without her. There were still a few days left before she left, to distract herself from sad thoughts, and the woman decided to go shopping and buy things for the upcoming trip. In the mall, she went through the boutiques, without a second thought, grabbing everything she could lay her eyes on. Travel bags, swimsuits, parios, beach slippers, a silk robe, a few dresses, outfits for walking, cosmetics. Helen couldn't stop. She was overcome by a strange euphoria. It was as if she felt that this trip would open the door to a new life for her. Full to the brim. After filling the trunk with purchases, Helen sat down behind the wheel and was finally able to exhale. The phone rang. The woman even shuddered with surprise. Her son's number popped up on the screen. "Bobby, hello." She answered cheerfully, unexpectedly honest. "Mom, stop calling me that." Bobby replied indignantly. "I'm not little, you're always little to me." "Oh, parents." The boy stretched out. "Mom, are you okay? Dad hasn't called." "Honey, I don't feel like talking to him. You know he's hurt me a lot, but I'm not mad at him. I'm just ignoring him so I don't give in to his advances. Are you sure you want a divorce? Life happens. You can always find a way to work things out. No one's saying you have to forgive him right away." Let him feel guilty. Maybe that'll finally get him to take some action towards you, Bobby. This is bullshit. I can't bring myself to look him in the eye. I don't know, maybe it'll pass. They give us 2 months to reconcile for a reason. Pride, son, you know? Pride just won't let go. It's all just a crazy cocktail of resentment, misunderstanding, denial, and anger. But there's no hate. I understand why he did what he did. But I don't understand what kept him from coming clean. Fear. That only made it worse. The secret always comes out. So, son, I think I'm better off alone. As long as Mom's here, I'm always on your side. You know that. Helen knew it very well. From the day she was born, she and the boy had developed a special relationship. The child was as if an extension of his mother, following her everywhere, and was only capricious when his father was present. Helen accustomed him to drawing and cooking. Even the future specialty the boy chose, based on his mother's favorite hobby, cooking. He enrolled as a chef. One of the restaurants was already ready to accept a talented student in its kitchen. Helen was flattered because it was she who had identified in her child a talent that could become a lifelong endeavor. When Bobby learned of his parents' impending divorce, he sided with his mother without delay. Father's treason seemed to him something sacrilegious, breaking the very essence of love. Mom and Dad in his mind have always been an ideal couple, which cannot be destroyed by circumstances. And here you are, like in a classic melodrama, his father has a young mistress. Not just any mistress, but a brazen girl. I felt sorry for my mom when she went after the money. She didn't deserve that. Bobby had always admired Helen. In his eyes, his mother was the most beautiful, intelligent, and interesting. He was proud of her in front of his classmates and friends, and those, in turn, only confirmed his opinion. Bobby continued, Helen, and I'm going to the resort, stretched out the sun. With who? Where's she going, honey? The mother laughed. In a couple of days, I'm not going abroad, I'm going to Miami. I've been wanting to go for a long time, and today I decided and bought a trip. Oh, Mother, you're crazy. This alone will be boring. I'd love to keep you company, but my classes start next week. I don't have any. You should hang out. I feel like it would help me get my head straight and my thoughts straight. I'm only going away for 2 weeks, just in time for velvet season. It's a nice, family-run hotel. It's got its own beach. It's nice. Keep me posted so I don't worry. Okay, sure, honey, I'll be in touch. I'll send you a picture. Yeah, and you'll close Bobby's resort. Bobby laughed. Or maybe I did. The mother laughed back. After saying goodbye to her son, Helen drove out of the mall parking lot. Traffic was already starting to gather on the road. The woman rushed to work, needing to sign some documents. Her assistant Kate had been calling since morning, although she knew perfectly well that the principal had taken the day off work. Rumors about the impending divorce of the bosses were already breeding. Theories were being proposed. Helen did not want to listen to all this, having become a casual witness to the conversation of managers in the restroom or in the cafeteria. That's why she took the day off, which was a complete surprise for all the subordinates. Everyone knew that Helen would rush to work any chance she got, and not leave it. Kate met her boss almost with applause. When Helen entered the office, the girl rushed to her, bringing impressive stacks. Papers. Helen. 2, wailed Kate. Thank God you've come. Can you imagine, Benjamin just refused to sign. And our coaster is on fire. What do you mean he refused? Helen was surprised. Usually her husband, without looking, signed what the secretary slipped him, realizing that the papers were in order. Are there some kind of overlays? There are no sponge muzzle pads, Kate. I spent all day yesterday preparing this paperwork 1,000 times over. You know how I feel about these things. He came in this morning and I attacked him, and he pulled me aside and said, I'm not signing anything, Kate. Wait for Helen. It's her responsibility. I have to go to the branch. No time, no time. His eyes rounded. Helen, yes, that's what she said. Can you believe it? He knows he's got a lot riding on this deal. And the supplier's in a hurry. They're having some kind of logistical problem. If he doesn't send it now, it won't be for another week. And the buyer's already paid for everything, so he won't wait. I'll talk to him. Kate, don't be nervous. Everything's fine. I'm sending the documents and a few other things. I'll be gone for 2 weeks. You'll have to manage without me for a while. Absent how? Kate exclaimed in horror. You're the lifeblood of this office. Look, you were gone for 1 day. It was almost a disaster. Without exaggerating, Kate hurried to reassure the boss's girlfriend. I will talk to Benjamin so that such a thing does not happen again. And I trust you completely. In case of anything to the financial, turn to the financial. James, I'll authorize him. Where are you going, Helen? For 2 weeks? To a resort? Helen replied dreamily. It's been 100 years since I've had a vacation. What a resort. Star with pleasure, girl. Cool, yes, smiled Helen. I want to put my thoughts in order. Because against the background of all this, I have such a mess both in my soul and in my head. How do you do things? Yes, the assistant smiled sympathetically. Katya, like all the other employees, was shocked by the news of the couple's divorce. They seemed to be such a strong couple. Many were more worried about what would happen to the firm, because now it would be not so easy to do business together. Everyone was afraid of downsizing. Are you alone? Are you going? Why not? As Helen left the office, she realized she was craving coffee. Stopping at the nearest coffee shop and taking her favorite double espresso, the woman suddenly remembered that there was no coffee in her parents' apartment, where she had been living for several days. And she hadn't even noticed it, tormenting her with thoughts of her husband's infidelity and the fear of being alone forever. Helen suddenly remembered that Nick, who had sold her a wonderful Yemeni coffee last time, had put aside another pack for her. The woman immediately went to the shop. For some reason, she suddenly had an unbearable desire to see that man who had been so thoughtful with her and treated her to a flavorful drink. As Helen entered the store, she saw Wendy behind the counter. The woman greeted her cheerfully. Good afternoon, Helen. It's good to see you. It's been a while. Hello, Helen replied. No, I've been here recently. You were ill, I think? Oh yes, imagine, it was so hot. I had a cold and the air conditioning. I had to take a sick leave. Nick worked here for me. It was so uncomfortable. No way. Who's immune to illness? Nick recommended some really good coffee, so I decided to get another pack. He said he'd put the Yemeni mocha aside especially for me, waiting for more. Let's see, Wendy was worried, and Nick himself is on the spot. He said when he stopped by next time to ask him to call him. Oh, the salesman was confused. And Nick is away. Do you have important business to attend to? No, Helen smiled. It was just nice to chat then. So I thought. Helen was a little upset that she hadn't been able to see that charming man. I don't know why she felt a thrill thinking about him. He doesn't come here much, Wendy said, taking a bag of Yemeni aerobics out of the back. I think I found that one. Yes, that's the one. Helen rejoiced, recognizing the distinctive design of the package. Have you tried it yourself? Of course, nodded the woman. The coffee is excellent. It's a pity they didn't bring enough, but I think Nick will order some more. I hope so, Helen sighed. There was a note next to the packet, by the way, Wendy said with a squint. Wendy. Obviously. Which one? Helen was surprised. Look at this. Wendy handed Helen a neatly folded piece of paper. This beautiful coffee is a gift for the most beautiful woman. Helen, please accept this humble gift from me. It will be my pleasure. Nick, what is it? Helen looked from the message to Wendy. I can't accept such a gift. What do you mean? The woman laughed. I think it says it clearly. It's not worth refusing. Nick, apparently, had every reason to believe that he would please you. It's a bit awkward, Helen mulled at the strange man. What's so uncomfortable about it? He must have liked you. I'll tell you a secret. After his wife died, he went to work. And he was so handsome. Women chased after him in droves, but he was adamant. So I'll tell you, if he's paying this kind of attention, it means he's got something in his heart. For him, coffee is not just a commodity, but a true love. His wife died, you say? Helen said thoughtfully. Yes, sighed Wendy. Lissa used to run the place himself. There was such a nice woman behind the counter. She wasn't arrogant, but simple, always with a smile. And then she was diagnosed with this horrible brain cancer, and in 6 months, the girl was dead. Nick wasn't himself. After the funeral, he disappeared for months. Didn't even take his son with him, left him with a nanny. His brother took care of things, thank God. Then he came back. He came to his senses. I thought I'd have to say goodbye to the store. So Nick is your director. Helen was surprised. Didn't he say? Wendy laughed. He pretended to be a salesman again. Well, he likes to keep it simple. He owns the whole chain. He doesn't mind standing behind the counter sometimes. He and Lisa, when they started the business, they did all the merchandising themselves. Think about it. Wealthy people could turn up their noses and wait for the money to roll in, but these people don't. They really did what they love to do. You could see that right away. When is he coming back? Unexpectedly, Helen asked. Nick is a conspirator? Wendy smiled. In a week or two. Honestly, I don't even know where he's gone. Just said he'd be out of town for the time being. Unless it's up to me to figure out the details. I see, upset. Helen stretched out. Let me give you his phone number. Wendy suddenly suggested. What are you doing? Helen exclaimed fearfully. That's so embarrassing. And what would I say to him? I'd better come back later and hopefully get him. I'm going away now too. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. I think he'll be back by then. It's up to you, Wendy agreed. Although I wouldn't lose heart if I were you. He obviously likes you. I know him well. The chief never just does anything. Although, as I recall, you're married. So it's understandable to have doubts. Well, that's where I'd argue. Why this line? Suddenly you want to tell Wendy everything. I'm divorcing. How's that? The woman was genuinely surprised. All banal cheating, sighed Helen. Imagine 20 years together. And then, on top of that, he took a mistress. And this juvenile girl still came to my house and began to shake the rights. I just can't find the strength to forgive him. I've weighed everything, trying to convince myself that many families go through this and nothing, continue to live, and myself began to dig. It's something to think about, Wendy sighed. 20 years is a long time. And how could you cheat on such a beautiful and pleasant woman? To embarrass Helen. I got old. That's what it's all about. Nonsense. Wendy replied rather sharply. You look great. I can tell you're looking after yourself. Who told you that? The mistress. She's probably in her 20s and likes to get on your nerves. I'll tell you, a woman gets better after 40. Like a good wine. Thank you, Wendy. I'd like to hear such compliments from my husband, but I guess he has a different opinion. Oh, come on. If he stopped seeing you as the one. Boldly divorce, nothing to regret about the years lived together. You still have ahead of you and all the happiness at any age to catch up. Maybe throw all the problems out of your head. My advice to you is to go somewhere to rest. To unwind, it'll be easier. I'm going to a resort, Helen said dreamily. Do you feel you need to do it? So good luck. Be sure to come back and tell me later. Did it help you? Of course, Helen laughed. Where am I going to get away from you? At the Miami airport, Helen took a cab. Despite the fact that it was several kilometers to the sea, the woman could smell it. Perhaps it was the power of self-importance, but it was this barely respectable smell, which was impossible to confuse with anything, that caused a whole flurry of emotions in her soul. The cab driver drove her to the center rather quickly. When the car pulled up, a beautiful wrought iron fence, killed by grapes. Helen realized that she was not mistaken with a hotel. Behind the fence was a gorgeous 2-story mansion with an open attic, and a few other houses were guessing at the back of the lot. Helen was to spend the next 2 weeks in one of them. Here the smell of the sea became much more distinct. Helen even thought she could hear the sound of the waves. The woman rang the bell. After a few seconds, the wicket was opened by a pleasant young man who introduced himself as Alex. Let me take your luggage, the young man said, and deftly snatched Helen's bags from the trunk of the cab. The guy invited the guest to go to the reception to check in. Entering the wicket, Helen gasped. The yard was drowned in greenery. In spite of September, the ales were blooming. Almost everything around was dotted with delicate pink and white flowers. In the center of the courtyard was a cozy gazebo that had sprung up around a huge raft. There was a wonderful aroma in the air. Even if you closed your eyes, you could easily realize that you were somewhere on the coast, not in a stuffy city. I'm glad to see you as a guest. Helen was greeted by a pretty girl who looked a lot like Alex, who had met her at the gate. My name is Daria. You can contact me or Alex with any questions. Have you met your brother yet? He's taking the luggage to the house right now. I'll take you there in a few minutes. Your place is very nice, Helen smiled. I have to admit that you were recommended to me and told me right away that the place is even better in person than in the photos. Thank you, replied Daria. We really appreciate our guests. You see, it's a family business, so reputation is very important. And in Florida, there is so much competition that we have to go for quality or quantity. We now have 3 large guest houses in operation. You were just moving into one of them. And from next year, my parents have decided to rent apartments in the main house. The attic is very nice, the terrace is open and kiwi grows there. Are all the houses occupied now? Helen asked. She didn't want to be in contact with anyone. That was why she had chosen this option. Besides you, there are guests in one other house. The 3rd one is booked, but the vacationers will arrive only in a week, so nothing will interfere with your vacation, she smiled. Helen liked the atmosphere in this cozy world. Alex returned, ready to walk her to the house. Together, they walked along a narrow path, paved and cobblestone, through which the grass broke through. The yard seemed dark from the vegetation, but it did not spoil it at all. On the contrary, it created some feeling of chamber space. Here we are, Alex proclaimed, showing the guest a nice cottage with a spacious veranda. Your cottage is the closest to the beach. There you see, there is a path, a couple of steps, and you are by the sea. It was evident that the young man was very proud of the place. As they walked along, he told a little about how his parents had built the hotel. Besides their family, there were a few other people working here, a cook and a maid, a gardener. Most of the duties were done by his brother and sister, but it wasn't a burden to them in the least. How wonderful! Sincerely admired Helen. By the way, from the back of the house, there is an exit directly to the beach, so you can enjoy the beautiful sunrises and sunsets. Helen, a little more, chatted with Alex while he showed her the house. After that, the young man tactfully retired to the woods to call if he needed anything. After closing the door behind the guy, Helen quickly changed her clothes and ran to the sea. The veranda had a great view of the private beach and the pier from the shore to the resort. In the lounge from the 2-wave res, it was quite windy, so the waves were crashing violently against the concrete barriers. And moored at the pier, the boats were going up and down, giving herself over to the power of the natural elements. Helen took off her flip-flops and with childish joy threw herself into the water. It was warm, as if it had accumulated over the summer, all that the sun generously bestowed. The waves knocked Helen off her feet, but she, laughing, floundered in the surf, trying to get up. Realizing she wouldn't succeed, the woman gave herself over to the elements and swam. How long had it been since she had swum? And how marvelous it was that the beach was completely empty. Helen would burn with shame if anyone watched her awkward attempts to fight the waves. In satisfaction, the fallen woman went ashore and lay down directly on the confused towels. The sun listened affectionately to the drops, and it felt hot on her skin, even though the time was nearing sunset. Resolving herself a little on the shore, Helen headed back to the house. There was still some unpacking to do. Finished with getting settled in her new place, Helen decided to take a walk around town. It was already getting dark. Night came suddenly in the south, plunging everything in it into graphic darkness. The soft light of the lanterns was building into a siege. The woman stepped outside the wicket and set out to explore the neighborhood. The house was located almost in the very center of Miami. After walking only blocks, Helen found herself on a brightly lit street where the smell of kebabs and music blared from numerous summer cafes. The smell of building up on the coals, the meat intolerably beckoned. Helen looked into a small Armenian restaurant where she was immediately seated on a comfortable, cushioned bench. The hospitable host brought her a whole dish of fragrant kebab and a kettle of aromatic tea with British. Finally, the woman was able to relax. Bright garlands lit up the cozy courtyard. There were few visitors, so Helen just sat and enjoyed delicious food and good music. The owner of the place, an elderly man named Trevor, offered wine. Helen saw no reason to refuse. After all, she had come for a vacation. The good-natured host sat down next to her. "Permission to court you, beautiful stranger," he began gallantly. "Pour a glass of thick, dark wine. Taste our own production." "Thank you for," embarrassed Helen, and bought a drink. "Is that true? You make amazingly so sweet and addictive. I've never tasted anything like it. My dad's always been in the wine business." "Do you know how delicious the grapes grow here? Only the local sun and soil can produce something like this. Not unlike the French. Wine is a matter of taste, of course. But for ours, even Trevor's henchmen come from abroad." Helen realized that her host was embellishing reality. But the wine was indeed excellent. Chatting some more with the good-natured old man, Helen went home, unbearably inclined to sleep. Reaching the bed, she fell asleep instantly, intoxicated with wine, sea air, and fresh impressions. In the morning, she woke up very early, absolutely pronounced. There was a knock at the door. Helen opened the door and saw Daria smiling sweetly on the threshold. "I apologize for being so early," the girl apologized. "I was wondering what to bring you for breakfast. We got some delicious goat cheese today. The company is located near here in the mountains. The quality is top-notch. I'd like you to appreciate it." "Let me rely on your taste," Helen said. "I'm ready to eat anything." Despite the dense dinner, Helen felt hungry, as if she hadn't eaten anything for days. She gladly accepted her hostess's offer and waited impatiently for breakfast to arrive. Half an hour later, the maid came in, carrying a basket covered with cotton cloth. Helen took the breakfast that was intended for her and made up her mind to have her meal on the veranda. She carefully placed the contents of the basket on the table. Besides Daria and cheese, there was still hot bread, a jar of apricots, jam, butter, bottles of milk and juice, and a bunch of white-black grapes. Such a set caused Helen to be delighted. She made herself a few sandwiches and sat down in a long chair. Suddenly, her attention was attracted by a rustle on the path towards the beach. "Here come the neighbors," Helen thought with interest. "I wonder what kind of people live there." On the one hand, she didn't want to get acquainted with anyone, but on the other hand, she would have to meet them and say hello when she met them. In this case, it is worth being polite as much as possible so as not to feel embarrassed. A boy of about 10 years old jumped out of the corner of the house. A child bouncing merrily, waving a towel. "Hello," Helen called out to him. "Hello," smiled the boy. "I thought we were the only ones vacationing here. Have you been here recently?" "Yes, last night." The child came closer with a wide smile on his tanned face. Bought me with his openness. "My name is Jacob," friendly he said, and extended his hand to Helen. "And I am Helen," she answered, responding to his not childishly strong handshake. "Just Helen." Jacob was surprised. "Yes, you can just Helen. And we can immediately on you. I don't like these formalities." "Did you go swimming?" "Yeah," the boy happily replied. "It's such a cool resort here. And who are you here with?" "My dad and I are on vacation together." "I thought it would be boring. But I even like that there is no one. Aren't you studying?" Helen was surprised. "The school year has just begun, and I'm homeschooled," Jacob said seriously. "I'm always sick. It's more convenient. My dad brought me here because the doctor told him the sea air would be good for me." It was hard to tell from the child's appearance that he had health problems, but Helen felt it was tactless to ask for details. "Have you had breakfast?" "I've got all sorts of goodies here." "Breakfast, thank you," the boy politely declined. "Don't you want to go swimming too? You can see the jellyfish there. By the way, they come a lot in the morning, even on the shore. Aren't you afraid that if you don't touch them, there's nothing to be afraid of?" "I don't do anything bad to them. They respond in kind." "Well, let's go," agreed Helen. "Now I'll just quickly get ready." She quickly put on her swimsuit, took a large towel and applied sunscreen. When she came out, Jacob was patiently waiting for her near the veranda. "I'm sorry it's been so long." Helen apologized. "How long is long? You should know how Dad is going." I'm already swimming across the sea, and he's just coming out." Helen laughed. She liked the spontaneity with which her new acquaintance talked while remaining serious. For some reason, she saw him as Roma. Helen loved children. Once she even started talking to Benjamin about having a second child. But for some reason, her husband didn't support the idea. Helen threw off her robe, stepped into the cool resort. The sun was starting to get used to it, but the water was nice and stroked her skin. There were indeed a lot of jellyfish around, but they swam only at the wave of the res. Helen was afraid of these creatures, so made the decision not to poke close. "Would you like to race?" shouted Jacob. Already swam a couple dozen meters from the shore. "Why not?" Helen laughed. She was a good swimmer in her youth, even practiced it professionally. The new buddies began their confrontation. Helen was splitting the salt water with strong sweeps of her arms. Despite her best efforts, the boy was significantly ahead. As soon as the woman got a little closer to him, he accelerated sharply and sprinted forward. When they tiredly made it to shore, both of them were shivering with their backs to the sun. Both enjoyed the cries of the seagulls and the sound of the waves. Sprawled out on a chaise lounge, "It's such a pity there are no seashells here," Helen suddenly said. "This is a peculiarity of the beach," Jacob said seriously. "If there was sand, you could collect them in buckets. Do you like shells? I know where you can get papa. Let's have a bonfire on the beach tonight. Can we do that? We used to do that with papa when the clams were hot. And then I'll bring the shells with me. That would be nice." The woman supported the idea. "Daddy won't mind. Because some auntie is clinging to us, she's trying to keep us company." "Is it an aunt?" the boy replied cheerfully. "As for me, you're great. You're fun. Do you have kids?" "Yes," Helen answered proudly. "My son's name is Bobby, but he's all grown up and dreams of being the best chef in the world." "Wow. Cool." Jacob sincerely admired. "But I dream of becoming a marine biologist." "Very interesting." Helen was surprised. "Do you like animals?" "I love life in general," said the boy with some sadness in his voice. "And the ocean? It is so interesting. Do you know how many unexplored species live there? I want to discover them all." "That's commendable. I'm also very fond of dolphins. Do you know how many there are here? You can even see them from here sometimes. But you have to watch it in the evening, close to sunset." When we went out with my dad on the boat to the resort, they came right to the board. I even managed to stroke their noses. "I would like to swim with dolphins," dreamily said Helen. "In the resort is not worth it," seriously replied the boy. "They can play and take away with them. In the best case of bruises, it is better to go to the oceanarium. Is there one in Florida? Do you want me to ask my dad? He takes us. I'll think about it. Honestly, I'm scared. Fear must be dealt with." The boy reacted hotly. "And if you live with them, you won't learn anything new about life." Helen was amazed that the child reasoned like a philosopher. On the other hand, isn't he right? Why should she deny herself something, covering herself with fears and insecurities? Didn't she herself make a choice not so long ago, fighting the fear of loneliness? And nothing, she's alive, healthy, enjoying her vacation. She could have gotten discouraged. "Oh, there's Daddy," Jacob exclaimed joyfully. Helen turned around to pike her eyes from the bright sun. A tall man in a beach robe was approaching them. He was waving his hand in greeting. Jacob jumped up and ran towards his father. As they approached, Helen opened her mouth in surprise. Standing in front of her was Nick. "Oh, what a meeting." The man addressed her cheerfully. "Who is our new neighbor?" "Good morning," Helen replied, averting her eyes. She felt that her cheeks were blushing. "What are you doing here?" "I decided to let myself rest. I've been working all the time and I feel like I'm running out of energy." "Are you with your family?" Nick asked. "No," the woman smiled shyly. "One duck." The man was surprised. "We need to fix this right away. We've been tracking here for a week. Honestly, we missed the female attention." "Daddy, do you two know each other?" the boy asked. "Do I know you?" the father confirmed. And Helen nodded. "That's great. I wondered why Helen and I were so easy to talk to." Jacob was thrilled. "Helen, then you just have to make a fire on the beach with us tonight." "What about you?" Nick asked his son with a squint. Already on you? Of course, nodded the son. Helen is so cool. We were even swimming against each other right now, and I was blowing. Helen laughed with feigned resentment. Then I suggest that you and I, Helen, switch to you. Nick smiled at her. It's a little strange. The woman happily agreed with him. Then we can just call it Helen. Just Nick. The man held out his hand to her. Nice to meet you in a more comfortable environment. In the evening, the company settled down on the beach, intending to roast the airplanes on the fire. Where the whole sack of them had come from was unknown. He was careful to conceal his sources. Nick, with skillful movements of a man who often went camping, made a fire out of the fins scattered along the shore. The wood was dry. During the day, the sun had evaporated all the moisture from them. The flames raced sharply across the dried wood into the dark sky, began to sigh sheaves of sparks. Jacob was deftly pulling clams out of their shells with a penknife, and Helen was calling them to the thin pond. Nick immediately said it would taste better that way than on the metal checkers. Together, they all sat down on large logs brought to shore and waited with rapt attention for the treats to be ready. Nick told funny stories that had happened to him in his youth. Jacob was happily running along the shore, lighting Bengal lights. Helen felt so happy around these seemingly strangers. She hadn't relaxed in a long time. And these father and son were literally radiating warmth of spirit. When the last bobby was eaten, Jacob began to yawn. Nick led him into the house and returned a few minutes later, carrying 2 soft plates and a bottle of wine. That was it. The guy's gone to the tablet. He'll be fast asleep in no time. Running to himself, and this is for us. I think we'll sit a little longer. Nick carefully covered Helen's shoulders with a warm cloth. Despite the hot day, it was perceptibly cooler at night, a little cooler. At 6, Helen was getting warmer and climbed onto the chaise lounge with her feet. Nick stationed himself on a neighboring one. What a fool, he said, slapping his forehead with his palm. I forgot the glasses. So we'll be like teenagers, Helen laughed, drinking from the neck and romantic, because I agree, only if you are not squeamish. No, of course not, Helen smiled. She was very pleased to be in the company of this man. And any conventional standards of propriety seemed silly now. The sky was dotted with stars. They hung so low that they seemed huge. Helen had never seen such beauty. We should have a telescope now, Nick said, as if reading her mind. In my youth, I was fond of everything that could go to the nature passionately loved, and always took the telescope with me. Such a weight. But no, I wanted to carry it in my backpack. I stumbled once again. I'm afraid, God forbid, I'll break it. But then I'm so happy. Watching the night sky through it, I even took a morning of shooting. I still have a lot of photos. It would be interesting to have a look, Helen said softly. No problem. When we get back, I'll show you everything. If, of course, you don't mind coming to visit us, the woman said happily. She would really like to get to know these wonderful people better. And when are you leaving? Not 10 more about later, alas, business matters, sighed Helen. When you sit like this on the seashore, inhaling the aroma of the fire and enjoying the amazing wine, it seems that this whole world exists somewhere in a parallel reality, which you have nothing to do. But a fairy tale can't be eternal, right? Nick nodded. Though if work is fun, you don't notice the difference so much. On the other hand, if it weren't for work, I'd miss out on a lot of things in life. Like meeting you. Helen blushed. She was glad now that the darkness and the fire masked her embarrassment. You know, she suddenly said. I stopped by the store before I left. Oh, so you got my humble gift. I have to admit, I was embarrassed. Although I was upset when Wendy told me you were away, for some reason I wanted to see you. Helen, Nick said, pausing for a moment, do you believe in fate? I don't know, the woman thought. I used to be fond of esotericism, but when I got married, for some reason I abandoned everything. Everything was replaced by everyday life, work, raising my son. I believe, looking at the fire, the man said. Or rather, he started to believe. When Lisa fell ill, I could not understand the fact that a young, blossoming woman with an open heart could burn out in a few months. But it was her death that triggered something more. I went to Nepal after the funeral, lived there for a couple months, opened my eyes to a lot of things. If my wife had been alive, I would not have decided to make the trip. I would not have met those wonderful people who gave me the unique gift of realizing the value of life. May I ask a delicate question? Helen asked. Sure. What's Jacob's illness? He told me he was referred here by his doctor. It's just that the boy looks perfectly healthy. I wouldn't say he's that bad. He's asthmatic. People live with it. But the thing is, after Lisa died, he started having panic attacks on a regular basis. My son was just suffocating, unable to cope with the suffocation on his own. I tortured him. I dragged him to hospitals. Even homeschooled him so he'd worry less. The resort is the perfect place to deal with his physical and mental ailments. I take him here often. This hotel belongs to our acquaintances, so we will be given a room at any time. That's how Helen stretched out. Will you tell me why you're here alone? As I recall, you're married. Does your husband refuse to keep his beautiful wife company? He's not afraid, unless she gets stolen. No, he's not. Helen sighed heavily. Are we getting a divorce? How? Nick was surprised. How so? It's just that he cheated on everything. I haven't forgiven him. For me, unlike him, 20 years of marriage is not an empty sound. But I can't live next to someone who betrayed me so easily. Pride prevents you from not blaming yourself, the man reassured her. I, too, would not be able to forgive treason. In my opinion, love is a mutual feeling. If, on the one hand, it ceases to manifest itself, it means that the second is not worth trying to preserve what is no longer there. Why torture yourself every day, seeing a person who reminds you of your misbehavior? Habit should not replace breathing a full chest. You're a beautiful woman. You shouldn't miss out on a chance at a happy future by keeping yourself around someone who treated you meanly. I feel old. Even Benjamin's mistress tried to hurt me with it. Nonsense. Nick objected. How old is old? You look beautiful. Look how your eyes shine. Age is a state of mind. They're numbers on a passport. Don't listen to anyone. Society imposes stereotypes that ruin everything. People are stupid, willing to go along with the majority opinion. That's good to hear. I guess I've just rarely been told that. So I've gone along with that society. So I need to fix that right away. The 10 days with Nick and Jacob flew by. They spent every day in each other's company. Helen realized that she had become attached to these people, how close they were to her in spirit. She learned a lot from new acquaintances and realized that plunged headlong into work, much missed. Early in the morning, Jacob came to the veranda. Helen only woke up for shoe covers, on-the-go robe. She walked out to the boy. Helen, let's go and have one last bath. We have a plane in 3 hours. Sure, honey. I'm just getting changed now. They raced in the water again. This time Helen won. I think she looked questioningly at the boy. Or were you giving in to me today? There, he stretched out disappointedly. How did you know that? It's a woman's intuition. It just seemed to me like you were always resentful of losing. Not at all, darling. The woman hastened to reassure him. I'm soberly assessing my chances. And what? I go a year in the pool, and the next season will be in full force. Then we'll see who's who for the next. Jacob's eyes lit up. You mean you'll go on vacation with us again? Of course, Helen replied convincingly. How can I deny myself such a pleasure? Helen, the boy began uncertainly. Do you really like us? Why do you ask? Laughed the woman. I don't know, Jacob shrugged. I'd like you to stay with us. You're great. You're a lot of fun to be with. That's how I have a lot of fun with you and your dad, too. That's great. Then you should move in with us. Jacob, what are you doing? Helen was embarrassed. Don't you think it's too soon to talk about it? Why too soon? Dad won't mind, that's for sure. What makes you think that? He said so himself. Helen, such a revelation, caught by surprise. Of course, they became very close with Nicholas. But the man was limited to wobbly courtship and never directly spoke about his intentions. Helen believed that in her face he sees a friend, a sister, but not a woman, although she herself felt that this man took a place in her heart. But she could not ask him directly about such things, for fear of being rejected or misunderstood. Now it appeared that Nick himself was hesitant to offer her more than companionship. When a cab pulled up to the house to take father and son to the airport, Helen got out to see them off. Jacob was hanging around, helping his father stow the suitcases in the trunk. He hugged Helen tightly goodbye, and she even thought she saw tears in his eyes. "Don't be sad, baby," she told him affectionately. "I'll come back in 4 days, we'll see each other. If you want, we'll go out. Promise?" he asked, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "Of course, I see no reason not to keep my promise." "All right then, bye." The boy gave her another big hug and climbed into the cab. Nick came over to say goodbye too. "Well, I don't even know what they say in such cases," he began, stammering. "I hope you don't disappear anywhere." "Where would I disappear to?" Helen laughed. "I'll be home in a few days." There was a pause in the air. Both of them didn't know what to say. Neither of them wanted to be different. Suddenly, Nick pulled Helen to him and kissed her. Woman Arabella, but it only lasted a split second. She responded to his kiss, realizing her heart was about to jump out of her chest, without saying anything. Nick got into the car. Helen took a long look after and lived cab. She couldn't believe that everything had really happened. She was brought out of her stupor by Daria's shout, who jumped out of the gate. "Forgotten." The girl wailed, waving the tablet in her hand. Jacob had left it at the front desk. "Leave it," Helen replied confusedly. "We live close by. I'll tell her when I get back." "Don't worry. If you want, call Nick and arrange it with him." Thank God, Daria exhaled. Otherwise, it wouldn't have turned out so well. The plane was coming in for a landing. Helen looked through the porthole at the lights of the city burning below. She was looking forward to returning, because saying goodbye to Nikolay had spilled out everything she had accumulated during the days of her wonderful vacation. After the departure of her friends, Helen had not been able to find a place of her own. She preferred to swim more often, went to the favorite Armenian restaurant for dinner. But the time dragged unbearably long. Finally, when the day of departure came, she did not hesitate to rush to the airport, even though it was still several hours before the flight. Despite Daria's and Alex's entreaties to take one last walk around the city, they sat in the stuffy departure hall. The woman couldn't sit still, and she regretted it at the airport. The flight was delayed. She didn't know what to do, and after talking to Bobby on the phone, she calmed down a little. The son felt that his mother was worried, but he understood that this worry was not negative, so he did not pester her with questions. Finally, the boarding was announced. Helen settled comfortably in the chair and almost immediately fell asleep, so washed out her restless day. She awoke to the pilot's voice coming from the speakers, announcing that the plane would be landing soon. Walking down the escalator, Helen noticed a familiar figure. Nick was standing apart from the rest of the greeters. The woman's heart desperately wanted to, and after all, she hadn't told him when she was arriving. Surprise mixed with a sudden feeling of warmth. When she approached the man, he smiled guiltily. "I couldn't let you wait for a cab." "Yeah, but how did you know what time my flight was?" "Helen, we don't live in the Middle Ages." Nick laughed. "Called the hotel, Daria laid it all out." She was all worried about Jacob's tablet, thinking, apparently, you'll hide something with it. "It's all in the middle of nowhere." "That's it." Helen was embarrassed. But it's a terrible hassle to go to the airport in the middle of the night to pick up a woman who's practically a stranger. "Let's not pretend." Nick's tone became serious. "You're not a stranger to me. Of course, I can only entertain hopes, but somehow I believe that my feelings are mutual." "Nick." I hesitated. Helen, her heart was desperate to tell him everything she felt, but fear prevented her from opening up. "I'm afraid of what?" The man was surprised. "How can someone as whole and self-sufficient as you be afraid of anything?" "I'm afraid of feelings," Helen replied with a blank stare. "And what is there to be afraid of them, if they are there? After all, I understand. You are not indifferent to me too." "I am. No." Helen was completely confused. Nick's confession was not a revelation to her, but she still had her doubts. "Helen, listen. I realize that your heart has been deeply hurt by the betrayal of someone close to you. But I'm willing to do anything and more to make you happy. From our very first meeting, I realized that I see a woman in front of me with whom I am ready to spend the rest of my days. When you told me you were married, I realized it was useless to even try to win you over. Women like you don't just let go. You can try to downplay your worth all you want, but I see you for what you really are. And your husband's a fool to let himself lose you. If I were him, I wouldn't give him the slightest reason to doubt my love for you. Nick, are you serious? Helen couldn't believe her ears. It was wild to her that he would openly declare his love for her after knowing her for only a couple of weeks. How could one realize love in such a short period of time? Sweetheart, believe me, it takes much less time to feel true love. I've been in love. I know what it's like. I'm a one lover by nature. Lissa was once my whole world, but fate has decreed that she no longer lives in the ruins of the past. A hardship. For years, I tried to see the good in the world around me. And then I met you. I don't know if it's karma, chemistry, mysticism, obsession. I don't get off as easy on people as I think I do. You don't believe me? Talk to Wendy. She knows me as the irradiated one. That woman was a close friend of my late mother's. Literally rocked me on her lap when I was still under the table. I don't open up to just anyone. Too many people get burned. And what I'm telling you right now, you may not believe it, but just know that I love you. Helen stood there as if thunderstruck. She hadn't heard those words in years and didn't even believe she would ever hear them again. She was so fixated on her own irrelevance as a woman that it was hard for her to believe in the sincerity of a simple phrase spoken by this man. But the way Nick said it convinced her that he wasn't lying. I'm not asking you to reciprocate me, Nick said sadly. That's too presumptuous of me. I can't count on a reciprocal feeling. Helen suddenly burst out. What's wrong? Helen's voice became more confident. It's not presumptuous. I like you a lot. I caught myself thinking about you in the store. For me, as a married woman, such thoughts should have been put to rest. But this whole situation feels like I found out about Benjamin's affair for the sole purpose of getting closer to you. Before I left, I was really upset that I didn't catch you. I certainly never expected to meet you where I had hoped to be alone with myself. You asked me if I believe in fate. I do. I do. It can't just be a chain of coincidences. It's just hard for me to accept the fact that I can be happy. It's been years since I've felt joy in my heart. You've turned everything upside down, and everything inside me trembles at the mere sight of you. But the mind tells me there's a catch. Helen, there is no catch. There is. I'm telling it like it is. And right now, you can either reject me or accept me. You can't do either. The choice is yours either way. Nick, tell me, do I have time to digest what I've heard? I desperately want to tell you yes, but I'm afraid the decision will be rushed. Sweetheart, he replied affectionately, putting his arm around her shoulders. You have as much time as you want. I won't rush you. It's a decision you have to make solely on your own. Nick pulled Helen tightly against him and kissed her gently on the forehead. Helen melted. She was wildly pleased to feel needed and wanted and loved. After standing in each other's arms for a while longer, the couple headed to the parking lot. Nick quickly drove Helen home, making her promise to call him the next day. In the morning, getting ready for the office, Helen realized that she couldn't find her file folder. Most likely, she stayed at the old apartment. When she called Katya, she warned her that she would be late, and she went to the place where her family life had been ruined. Benjamin was not supposed to be home at this hour. His spouse usually left around 9 o'clock. The hands showed 11:30. Helen was even glad that she wouldn't have to meet her husband alone. Taking the elevator, she walked to the so-familiar door, suppressing memories and emotions. The key in the lock wouldn't turn. Strange, Helen thought. It's locked from the inside. I guess I'll have to be patient. Benjamin Society. Okay, I'll run in quickly, get the folder, and I won't be late. With these thoughts, the woman pressed the bell. The door was not open for a long time. Helen kept ringing until she heard the door turn for a click. Benjamin appeared on the threshold. He looked like he had just woken up and had had a good drink the night before. Helen even twitched in disgust. Hi, she said dryly. I need to pick something up. I'll leave right away. I won't disturb your peace. Well, come in. Nick grunted reluctantly. It was obvious that he was not at all happy about the sudden appearance of his wife. Where have you been so long? I called you. You didn't answer. At work, they say she left. Where? I don't know. And why did you call me? Helen asked, undressing. It doesn't matter, Benjamin said. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Helen headed for the bedroom. Benjamin blocked her way. Let me get you what you needed. I can get it myself, she replied sharply, trying to get around her husband. I'm in my own house for now. Helen, Benjamin said uncertainly. What do I see? You don't want me to go any further. You're not alone. Seeing how Benjamin's face changed from her question, Helen realized she was not mistaken. She yanked the bedroom door open sharply and wasn't even particularly surprised to see Vika floating peacefully in bed. Oh, said Helen loudly, trying to wake the girl up. What a nice meeting. Emily struggled to open her eyes, but as soon as her gaze focused on Helen, jumped up sharply. You don't have to worry, sweetheart, Helen remarked wryly. Do you feel at home? I don't think you need my advice, though. With a firm gait, she went to the desk at the back of the room and began noisily pulling out drawers. Finding the right folder, Helen turned around. Emily was still lying there just as she was. It seemed that the girl was ready to get under the blanket with her head just to avoid participating in this scene. Looking at the maiden in such a pathetic position, Helen noted that on her hand, cradling the blanket, was a ring speckled on it. All would be nothing, but the ring was a family heirloom, inherited by Helen from her grandmother. She couldn't tolerate such insolence. Get up, she ordered. What did the maiden have in her eyes? The very thing, roughly answered her Helen. Not only that you frowned at my husband, which I can still forgive in principle, now you are tormented with him yourself, so you managed to get into my bed in my house and put my ring on yourself. Are you dreaming of getting out of here? As I recall, you have an apartment. The girl was clearly suffering from a hangover, so the loud sound of Helen's voice hurt her. Do you need me to tell you again? I'm losing my patience, Helen. Or am I not making myself clear? Will Helen stop? Attempted to intercede for his mistress, Benjamin. Stop it, growled his wife angrily in his face. Benjamin even took a step back. He had never before seen his, always mild and tactful wife in such a rage. And you? How dare you bring this filth here, into our home? Why the hell did you swear to me here that you divorce her? Talking me out of it? You're a disgusting liar. At least you didn't lie to yourself. I don't give a damn what it's like anymore, but I won't tolerate insolence. She made a determined move toward Emily. The girl rotted in surprise. Take off the ring, Helen said slowly and calmly, looking then and there directly in her eyes. If you don't do it now, I won't get my hands dirty on you. You don't have to worry. I'll just call the police and file a report on you. Believe me, you won't get away with embezzlement. Emily flinched from her earlier. There was no trace left of the slap of the net and confidence. She tried to pull the ring off her finger, but it was stuck. No matter how hard she twisted it, nothing came out. Her finger only swelled more. Looking at these clumsy attempts, Helen laughed. She laughed long and with rapture. She was literally being driven to hysterics. These pathetic people are powerless against her unexpected onslaught. You know what? Suddenly Helen stopped laughing. Screw you guys. I don't have a lot of time to waste on you. I have more important things to do. With those words, Helen walked out of the bedroom, pushing Benjamin standing in the middle of the road. While she was studying, her husband entered the hallway. What a mess. He tried to make his voice sound confident, but combined with his appearance, it was unconvincing. So I arranged it by making sure this girl took off my ring. Otherwise, I'm gonna do what I said I was gonna do. I'm not kidding. I'll see you in the courtroom. And under the circumstances, you don't even expect me to give up the apartment. We'll divide everything according to the law. Keep that in mind. Helen slammed the door, waiting for the elevator. The woman pondered. She thought she had overreacted, but immediately pulled herself back. She decided she had done the right thing. So fervently loved, her husband used to seem like a pathetic man who gave no purpose to his words. And this is Emily. Now seemed the most appropriate party for him. Gradually, the emotional state matched. Helen arrived at the office already perfectly calm, as if nothing had happened. She immediately plunged headlong into the work she had missed. It was only in the evening that she remembered that she had not called Nick. In a hurry to make amends, she dialed the number. The phone was off. Strange, Helen thought. Busy. I guess I'll call back later. But neither the second nor the third time did Nick answer. Helen tried to call until the night before, but all her attempts failed. She didn't even notice that she had fallen asleep. When she woke up in the morning, Helen dialed the number again. "What the hell is this?" she said out loud. It couldn't be that he just turned off his phone. A bad feeling crept into her soul. Realizing that without finding out what happened will not calm down, Helen decided to call Jacob. The boy answered almost immediately. "Lachenko, hello, this is Helen. Called your daddy and he does not answer." "You are doing well." Helen, the boy spoke with a kind of tear. "Dad was in an accident yesterday. He's in intensive care right now. I wanted to call you, but there's no number. Dad's cell phone is missing." "Helen, please come over. It's not too bad. Honey, don't cry." Helen hurried to comfort the baby. Although she was paralyzed with fear. "I'll come right away. Tell me the address." Helen jumped out of the apartment, hastily dressed. The last thing she cared about right now was how she looked or where she was late for. Reaching her destination, the woman rushed to find the right apartment. Jacob opened the door. It was obvious from the boy's face that he was crying. Helen hugged the child tightly. "I'm so glad you came." Nolan sobbed. "I'm the one behind everything right now. Aunt Wendy's gone to the hospital, told me to stay home." "It's all right, darling." The woman stroked his head. "Let's go to the hospital together." How did this even happen? Dad was driving home, and a car slammed into him from the side. The police called me. Then Aunt Wendy came over, and I'm really scared, Helen, that he's gonna die. Suddenly, the boy began to choke. Helen remembered Nick telling her that severe anxiety gave him choking attacks. Panic gripped her. "Jacob, honey, just breathe deeply. Where are your insights?" The boy began fumbling in his pockets. Finally, he took out a small canister, and having taken a few breaths through it, Jacob began to breathe more evenly. And after a couple of minutes, the seizure was completely gone. "Helen," he whispered for me, "don't be afraid. I'm used to it. When Mom died, I thought I couldn't take it. And now Dad." That's what Helen said so firmly. "Come on, we have good doctors. Dad's gonna be fine. And you don't need him to see how worried you are. He loves you very much. Come on, let's get ready to go to the hospital. You know where he is lying." The boy nodded and began to pull on his shoes. They reached the clinic very quickly. The roads were almost empty. As soon as they entered the lobby, Helen saw Wendy. Wendy, a long time ago. The woman's eyes were swollen with tears. "My dears." She rushed to meet Helen and Jacob. "How are you here?" "I was up all night, waiting at the doctor's. Kolya's having another operation. He's lost a lot of blood. And it's a rare type. They're looking all over the city, but there's almost nothing. I'd love to give mine away, but I don't fit, and Jacob has a different interest. We've already called everyone we know, but no luck." "What group?" Helen asked with hope in her voice. -4. Helen felt as if her arms and legs were missing. She slowly lowered herself onto the chair and looked into Wendy's eyes. "Don't call the doctor." Quietly, she muttered, "I'm 4 negative. Let's not delay." Wendy became nervous. She rushed to the front desk and began to explain something vigorously to the nurse. She rang the bell just a minute later. The doctor entered the lobby quickly. When he saw Wendy, who was already familiar to him, he went toward her. "I just got word that a donor has been found." He asked. Yes, Wendy nodded. "Helen, come here, please." "Hello." Helen greeted the doctor. "I'm in the right group. I'm not sick. I'm willing to give whatever it takes. Are you a relative?" The doctor raised an eyebrow. "Yes," Helen answered without hesitation. She herself did not realize how it had happened. But now she felt that the person closest to her was balancing on the edge of life and death. Therefore, any delay could prove fatal. "Good," nodded the doctor. "Let's go to the procedure room and get you all set up. Don't worry. Nick is bleeding profusely, but with a timely transfusion, he can be saved. It's a miracle you showed up." Helen hasn't slept in 24 hours. It had been hours since the transfusion, but Nick was still in the ICU. The doctor told them all to go home. As soon as the patient's condition improved, he would let them know. But Helen flatly refused to leave. She sent Jacob and Wendy long ago in a cab, strictly instructing them not to leave each other's side until she called. They were all on edge now. Helen sat on the comfortable leather sofa and periodically fell into a dream. Every time a door opened or footsteps sounded nearby, she would startle, go to drink a bad cup of coffee, and then fall back asleep. She dreamt something terrible. Some tentacles were trying to drag Nick with them, tearing him from her arms. She was completely powerless to hold on to him. The man tried desperately not to let go of her arms and only screamed, "Helen! Helen!" Helen was quietly shaking her by the shoulder. "Doctor! Helen! Wake up!" Helen opened her eyes not immediately, realizing she was in reality. She squinted at the figure in the white coat. Helen once again repeated, "Doctor, we've moved Nick to a regular room. Everything's all right. You're welcome to visit him, but only for a short while." Helen jumped up from the couch as she realized the meaning of what she had heard. She clutched at the sleeve of the doctor's robe, just so he would not turn out to be an introduction. Together, they walked to the room. Helen knocked softly and fumbled for the door to the room. It was dark. Only the light from a small lamp and the lights of the equipment illuminated the headboard of the bed. Nick lay with his eyes closed. It was unclear whether he was asleep or not. Helen hesitated to enter for a long time. Finally, she made a move. Crouching down beside the couch, she took Nick's hand. He opened his eyes, seeing who was sitting next to him. The man made an attempt at a smile. His head was partially renamed. His nose seemed to be broken. There was a cast on his left arm. Helen smiled. "It's me. I'm so glad." Nick's voice was barely audible. It was dry, and his lips moved with difficulty. Helen took a bottle of water from the nightstand and carefully gave the man a drink. "You should know how glad I am." Nick only covered his eyes in response, as if to agree with Helen. "I don't know what I would have done if you were gone. We were so scared. But everything's gonna be okay now. I'm not going anywhere." The doctor said every word was hard for the man to say. "I was in an accident. I wouldn't have survived if they hadn't found the blood. A rare type I have. Knowing, sweetheart," whispered Helen. "It's okay. Now we just need you to make a speedy recovery." "I can do that." Nick tried to smile again. "The main thing is that you are near." A nurse knocked on the door, informing them that the time for the visit had come to an end. Helen leaned over Nick's face and kissed him softly, almost without touching him on the lips. She promised to come back as soon as she was allowed and to bring Jacob. Nick was on the mend quickly. He was discharged from the hospital 2 weeks later, but his arm was still adorned with a cast. Helen now did not stay late at work, trying as soon as possible to be near the man she loved, for whom now her support was the best medicine. She readily helped with the household chores, although a housekeeper was available. Wendy took over the store temporarily. Sometimes Nick felt that she knew much better how to run the business. For Helen, being able to be around her seemed like a real blessing. The only thing that clouded her thoughts was the approaching date of the divorce. When she told her son about the incident with Benjamin and Emily, Bobby was outraged. "Mom, you may think I'm a real cattle prod, but I'm not going to feed that dependent. I intend to remove my father from running the entire firm, leaving him with only the new branch. That's cruel," Bobby embarrassed Helen. She didn't want to punish Benjamin like that because the firm was their common child. But she partly shared her son's opinion. She did not like the fact that Emily would be almost as a mistress to dispose of other people's property. "And your father was not cruel to you. By the way, he was the one who offered me the firm in the first place. No one forced him to rewrite it. I realize now that it was probably the wisest decision of his life. Now that bitch would have taken half your company. He didn't even blink an eye, and I'm not leaving him with nothing. The new branch, from what I understand, will be very profitable. Enough revenue to support a bunch of teenage stoners. Do as you wish, son," sighed Helen tiredly. "For me, this man has ceased to exist. I don't even want to remember him. That's fine. He is there, in his branch, to you even on work will not go to you. I called him myself. I'll explain everything. I think we'll find common ground. For some reason, the conversation with her son left a bitter residue on her soul. Helen felt that Benjamin would curse her, but she didn't feel guilty. In any case, it didn't concern her anymore. The only thing left to do was to sign the papers officially dissolving the marriage. Toward the courthouse, Helen drove absolutely calm. She wasn't going to give Benjamin any reason to doubt that she was happy without him. When she reached the office, her husband was sitting on the bench. "You're unaccompanied today, aren't you?" Helen said wryly. Benjamin gave her an angry look. "Tibet, did you get what you wanted? Why are you asking me more questions? What are you talking about?" Helen was surprised. "I think you're the one who got what you wanted. Didn't you start this whole thing? Bobby called me. That's it. What does that have to do with me? You don't think I encouraged my son to remove you from the company? He's an adult capable of making informed decisions. Don't you think you've hurt not only me, but him as well? You betrayed your family? Don't expect generosity and humble acceptance. I honestly don't care. I'll thank him not to have to see you much, though. I broke up with Emily," Benjamin muttered under his breath. Helen replied sadly, looking away indifferently. "It's all right, you'll find someone else. You're still quite young and well off. I see no reason to suffer, Helen." Benjamin got up and tried to approach her. The woman deftly pulled away. "Let's stop all this. It's not too late to say in court that the parties have reconciled. Do I need you?" It was only after he left that I realized what a fool I'd been to get involved with that mercantile bitch. "I get it," Helen laughed. "She's the one who dumped you when she realized you didn't have the fortune behind you that she'd hoped for. You don't have to try to get me back. I'm happy with the man I love, and you can live your life the way you want to live it. You got a man quickly. You didn't hesitate. Not just any man, mind you, but a man who loves me and accepts me for who I am. And I love him just as much. So all storms are between us. It's over." At this point, a secretary came out of the courtroom and invited the couple to come to the hearing. Thanks to this, Helen never found out what her now ex-husband was going to answer her. Having received the coveted status, divorced, the woman as on wings jumped out of the courthouse, not even looking at Benjamin at parting. All she wanted was to be in Nick's arms. Her lover was waiting for her in a cozy coffee shop. When Helen came closer, she noticed that he was not happy about something. "Here I am, dear," she greeted Helen cheerfully. Nick, whose arm had just been removed from a cast, replied in a low voice, "I'm here now from the hospital, as you can see. Congratulations, you're finally back in action." "Wait," the man interrupted her excitement. "Something has come to my attention, and I'd like you to clarify the situation." "Of course," Helen said warily. "I wonder what could be known to me that you don't know. That's the thing, we both know it now, and I'm confused. You see, my doctor has now only provided the name of the man who donated his blood for me." Helen blushed thickly. With all the fuss, she hadn't thought to tell Nick about her good deed. And was it really that important? As if reading her mind, Nick looked intently into her eyes. "At least you realize that I owe you my life right now, both literally and figuratively." He endured a long pause, during which a whole spectrum of emotions shifted inside Helen. She couldn't understand why Nick was so displeased. Suddenly, the man woke up laughing. "Helen, did you really think I wouldn't find out about this? I'll carry you in my arms for the rest of my life. Out of 1,000,000 women, you have to meet the one who has this unfortunate rare blood type. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even exist anymore." Helen smiled. Tears were flowing down her cheeks, and it was now that she realized that she had found true happiness in the face of this amazing man. "Why don't you say something, my love? Say something. We're of the same blood. You and me." Helen said the famous phrase from Mowgli, which in her mind demonstrated the strongest bond between living beings.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Lisa did not like to be late for such grand events as the student party, but at the last moment, when she was ready to jump out the door, her mother held her back. Wendy considered it her sacred duty to have a talk with her before each outing. This obligatory part consisted of several recommendations, which Lisa had to listen to carefully and then absorb. Wendy said in a ministerial tone, "Where are you going?" Lisa thought doomfully, That's it. That's it. Now the educational work will begin." But out loud she said, "Mommy, I warned you 2 days ago that tonight we have a theme night. In honor of Valentine's Day, there will be a disco concert program and other nice things." The girl started to grab the doorknob, but her mother stopped her with a shout. "Wait, I understand everything, except one thing. Why did you say that as if you were going not to a cultural event, but to a pub? How many times have I told you not to water that skirt? It pulls your ass in obscenely." "Mom, everybody wears skirts like that today. You too, at one time wore what was considered fashionable. That suit Daddy and I gave you will fit you better. And as far as fashion goes, I'll tell you one thing, we didn't wear that kind of gaudy stuff. You cannot spit on yourself what does not suit you, such her liver, as now you can afford a tall girl with impeccably straight legs, and you're not doing so well in that regard." The mother slid an appraising glance at her daughter's figure, and after that, she herself took off from her shoulders a fur coat, frivolous pink color. "Go change. I'll wait." Lisa could hardly hold back tears of despair, but it was useless to argue with her mother. What hurt her most was that Wendy had so unapologetically reminded her daughter of her defects. It was true that Lisa's legs were a little out of alignment at the knees, but this flaw was only noticeable on close inspection. The girl muttered under her breath so that her mother could hear her remark. "Any mother supports her child, and you always try to humiliate me." Wendy already more peacefully noticed, not grumbling. "And thank me later. You can thank me later for the lessons in good taste. You are already 18, and it's time to decide on a style that maximally corresponds to your inner content. After all, this is the secret of a harmonious image of any self-respecting woman." Wendy still long spread on this hot topic, and Lisa in her room tried to pull a suit over the clothes, which greatly annoyed her mother. This disguise technique Lisa had to use frequently, as such clashes with her mother occurred regularly. The operation went well, and she adjusted her hair in front of the mirror just in case she wanted to see if she could get her hands on my hair. Lisa ran out into the hallway and froze under her mother's gaze. But Wendy was pleased with her appearance this time. "This is different. Couldn't you have dressed like that in the first place? A nice suit that suits you. You've turned into something else, haven't you? Run along, or I'll be late for my party." Knowing her mother's temper, Lisa had thoughtfully packed a pair of mind-blowing shoes. Wendy didn't even realize her daughter had a fashionable pair of shoes. This hit the girl bought with the money that her grandfather allocated her on the occasion of her majority. At the thought of Trevor, it warmed her heart, but there was no time to be distracted by sentimental moments and put on a fur coat. The girl finally left the apartment unhindered. Immediately from the entrance, she turned on the 4th speed and ran to the administrative building of the medical college, where she studied, but fast movement was hampered by icy ice, and she twice almost fell. Despite her speedy way of traveling, the girl was late for the start of the event. The festival was already in full swing, and she hastily changed her boots for fashionable shoes and hurried to the top, where young people were having a good time. The music was blaring at full blast. The high society made it impossible to focus on one thing at a time. Lisa stood at the entrance for a long time, trying to find at least one familiar face among the dancers. Suddenly, someone took her by the arm and pulled her to the center of the room. Lisa looked up and saw Max's smiling face. "Hi, where have you been? I waited for you at the entrance for half an hour, and then I thought you weren't coming." The girls, as loud as her buddies, screamed at me. My mom held me up. "She's worse than any probation worker I've ever had. Why were you expecting me? I don't remember you making a date with me." Max was just nodding his head or something. Whether he was agreeing with her, or is it the rhythmic movements adding to the background music? All pretty girls have memory problems. When we crossed paths in the cafeteria yesterday, I told you I wanted to go out with you. Lisa couldn't remember the incident, and remained silent. She tried to catch the rhythm of the moving dance, but she was hindered by her partner's gaze. Max moved beautifully and still had time to look at the girl brazenly. But even that was not enough for him. And after a few minutes of contemplation of his partner, he roughly attracted her to him and whispered hotly in her ear, "Listen, you so suits this strict costume in the style of Mary Poppins. You look so cute in it, and I'm just wearing a vest." It was only now that Lisa realized that she hadn't had time to take off the costume, which was hiding another outfit underneath. She didn't even want to imagine how Max would have reacted to that provocative outfit. A thought flashed through her mind. Her mom was right about thinking before putting on an outfit that was too revealing. Several times the girl tried to slip away from her overly insistent partner, but Max wouldn't let go of her hand. One popular track was replaced by another, and she had to dance. But most of all, the girl was embarrassed by her beau's vulgarities and compliments. He constantly whispered in her ear something that made her blush. But the young man regarded this as the girl's readiness to continue to get closer. When the DJ announced a short break, Max looked his partner intently in the eye and smirked cheekily. He asked Lisa, "How would you like to continue the evening somewhere in the United States? After all, it's Valentine's Day." Without waiting for a positive answer, Max put his arm around her waist and tried to kiss her. But Lisa pulled away abruptly. "Max, you're wasting your eloquence on me. While you have time, look for another girl. I'm sure there will be someone who will gladly accept your proposal." The young man did not want to admit his defeat and asked loudly enough that you break. "All you build yourself up, and yourself, probably, only thinking how to get off with a guy like me. Max, you think too highly of yourself. And besides, I'm not really into that kind of cocky." It was, as they say, a college thing. Level 80 bummer. The quiet whispering turned to loud talking, and a couple more started to pay attention to the argument. Lisa wanted to leave quietly, but humiliated by her refusal. Max did not want to let the girl go. One more minute, and a light verbal altercation would have turned into a conflict. But the situation was saved by the timely appearance of Betty. Lisa's friend had a unique ability. She could assess the situation at a glance. Now she also turned on her intuition and realized that the situation would not be resolved without her intervention. Betty grabbed Lisa's arm. "Where are you? I've been looking for you for an hour. We're all here. Come on, let's go." Betty dragged her friend to the other end of the hall, and the classmates began to greet Lisa with cheers from afar. The unpleasant residue from her interaction with Max quickly disappeared, and the girl never once looked in the direction where the rejected admirer had remained. In the circle of her friends, she felt completely safe. But this environment was also nice in that there was Rod within a stone's throw of her. Lisa liked this tall guy with unremarkable looks. Rod was studying to be a dental technician, but he often dropped in on them. Many people thought that these visits were related to Lola, who was considered the first beauty in their group. Lisa was also sure of this version and tried to come to terms with the idea that the guy she liked had chosen another girl. She even now tried to find among the familiar faces a recognized beauty. But alas, she was nowhere to be seen. From Betty did not escape her friend's confusion. She informed her in a whisper of recent events. "If you're trying to find the needle, you're trying in vain. Our queen has warmed up the student party, and even at the beginning of the event left with some major in a cool car. So seize the day." Lisa also whispered to her friend Betty, "Please, no innuendos. You know very well that I am not one of those who act like a hyena. And if I were you, I'd forget my principles. Rob's a good guy, not like his brother." "Who do you mean?" "That bastard I saved you from 5 minutes ago. I didn't know Max was Rob's brother. I just found out. They're not siblings, they're cousins. And as far as I know, they don't get along very well." Lisa didn't pay much attention to this news. She never supported the habit of some girlfriends to discuss other people's family problems. She had enough to do in her own family nest. Just fighting with her mother took energy and nerves, and Lisa was also responsible for her grandfather's welfare. However, Trevor's care was more of a pleasure than a nuisance. In the company of peers of the girl did not want to think about sad things, and the rest of the evening passed cheerfully and interestingly. When the event was over, the students all pile and noise, and songs to the guitar fell out into the street. For about an hour they wandered around the city center and the townspeople or popular songs about love. Then everyone slowly began to disperse. Rob volunteered to escort Lisa out. I don't know your exact address, but they say the neighborhood where you live isn't exactly peaceful, so I'm just gonna have to walk you out. If you don't mind, of course. Rob looked at Lisa and his eyes danced off the typewriter. The girl smiled too. This is the first time I've heard that I live in a creepy place. I even got scared, and I gladly accept your offer. They walked leisurely along the snowy streets and chatted about nothing. Suddenly, Max blocked their way. With his usual swagger, he began to reproach his brother. This meeting, I wondered who dared to steal my girlfriend. Turns out it was you, little brother. Rob cut him off. Max, stop making a fool of yourself. You have a bad habit of making a circus in public places. You got a bad habit of getting in my way too. Well, I won't spoil your evening. We'll talk about manners later. Max abruptly made a full turn, but slipped and almost fell. Everyone is against me today. Having a bad day, Yu looked at his brother once more, then at Lisa and whistled. The familiar motif disappeared into the alley. Rob felt embarrassed in front of the girl because of his brother's ugly act. Don't mind him. There's a saying about a child without an eye for a reason. Max never used to make such a pass at me. We were even good friends for a while, but then he was replaced. That's why I try to stay away from him. Our mothers rarely talk to each other anymore either. It's been a black cat for a long time. If they meet now, it's only at the funerals of their closest relatives. Lisa realized that her comments in this situation were unnecessary. She kept silent the rest of the way. They said goodbye warmly at the entrance of her house, without making any arrangements for a future meeting. But the next day, Rob showed up at their building during a big break. Lisa spotted him as she hurried to her lecture. The girl nodded a greeting and wanted to go on her way, but Rob asked her to stick around. Lisa, we didn't break up very well last night. Why don't we go out tonight? Or go to the movies? The girl's heart was racing, but she tried not to show her excitement. We could go out. I just have to be sure to show up at home. Rob smiled. Strict control. Sort of. My mom tracks my every move and thinks it's the right thing to do. Good. Chuckles. We'll keep your mother's best interests in mind. Meet me at 6:00 p.m. all right. Lola walked past, head held high, but she didn't even dignify the guy who had been eyeing her for so long. But Lisa bumped into her in the doorway of the auditorium. Lola saw her rival with a glare and remarked sneeringly that she had already picked her up before I could throw it. In principle, I don't mind. You can use it. Guys like Rob are not my type. Lisa didn't even take offense at her classmate, because she knew that she had only clothes and entertainment on her mind. Betty, as always, saw and heard everything. She looked disapprovingly at the bun and said very loudly, "There are some people in our ranks who happen to be used to categorizing people, and I think that such specialists should not be allowed near the sick." But the mare with skin and on her this remark did not affect. Not a single muscle on the doll-like girl's face, and only the cold blue eyes glared defiantly at Betty. And if that's a pebble in my garden, you're trying in vain. Because I'm not much affected by such moral lessons. Yes, I'm really not going to carry around a duck or an enema. That's a pleasure I'll leave to the likes of you. Betty, your name's good, but the rest of it doesn't fit. After a brief pause for convincing, she shared her plans with the same arrogance. You girls are so primitive, and I truly sympathize. After all, unlike you, I will be working in a place that you dare not even dream of. Lola gave Betty another glance, then looked at Lisa. Keep in mind, any minute I could blow the whistle, and the dog would come running after me. Her rival wanted to take a jab at Lisa, but she pretended not to hear her last words. All the girl's thoughts were centered around her upcoming date with Rob, and she didn't even catch the essence of the lecture. Every day the smell of spring was more and more palpable in the air. This incomparable aroma stirred the imagination and made young hearts beat more often, students of the final year of medical college. Neither were strangers to such excitement. Most of the girls sat in the lectures with absent looks, and the teacher tried to get through to their minds. Molly talked monotonously about the high purpose of nursing. A nurse was and remains the main assistant of a doctor. And you, my dears, should understand what responsibility will soon fall on your shoulders. Unfortunately, this understanding sometimes comes late. For example, now you are sitting on your mind somewhere very far away. And then, when new personnel come to the workplace, there is an anecdotal situation when one young specialist knows how to put an enema and the other where to put it. And this is not an anecdotal case at all. Molly knew how to keep the attention of the audience, and after her words, all those who were in the clouds returned to the ground. Laughter spread through the audience. One of the girls even dared to add to the collection of cool flavors of young doctors. Molly, that joke is long out of date. If you'd like a more recent one. One of your students recently surprised the entire medical community. It happened during internship in one of our city clinics, when the post nurse asked to collect tests in one of the wards of the department. The trainee, not thinking long, grabbed a basin and went to the specified ward. The thing is that all the men in the ward were subject to examination, and the girl decided to collect biological fluid from them in bulk. There was a peal of laughter in the classroom. Lola jumped out of the classroom with the words, "You are all assholes, and I hate you all. Are you laughing? Are you laughing?" While we have the chance, Molly urged everyone to calm the girl down. An unpleasant story can happen to anyone. That's why you shouldn't take your fellow man's blunder to ridicule. Perhaps the nurse incorrectly explained the task to the trainee. The teacher interrupted the girl who had previously told the blunders. In vain you, Molly Lola, are defending. The reason for her frequent ups and downs is that she does not think it necessary to look at least occasionally in textbooks. And then these specialists go into hospitals and treat patients. I think the problem of low qualification of novice specialists is very relevant today. By the way, it fits perfectly into the framework of your lecture. I do not want to humiliate anyone here. It's just a shame, so to speak, for the honor of the uniform. Molly had to admit that the student was right, and I dare to bring up the student's mishap. Betty, said Lisa in a low voice. Can you imagine what will start tomorrow at our college? Lisa was intrigued by this phrase of her friend. I think the tick will dig up on Mila. I don't think, I'm sure. Do you know who Lola's dad is? No, I'm not interested in knowing. And you should. Her mom works at the Ministry of Education, and her dad runs the entire pharmacology department. Such smart people have such a clueless daughter. It's a sad fact, of course. But I truly feel sorry for our Molly. She's really one of the best teachers. The girls were still cracking up a little on extraneous topics because the brain refused to perceive such serious material as the basics of the sister case. Barely the bell rang, the future medics flocked and shoved out of the classroom. Betty pushed her friend to the side and pointed her hand toward the hall. Look already, and poured her resentment into the first returning vest. Lisa turned to the side where she did not look away, watching the girlfriend, and saw Max comforting Lola. This touching scene made no impression on her. But Betty, with a sneer, said, "You don't know they're dating." "No, I'm not interested." "Right? Why would you look in other people's windows when there's a light shining in your own? Did I almost forget that you and Ra are having an affair? Honestly, I envy you." Lisa winked playfully at her friend. "Like you don't have a date. Don't join me. And anyway, I think it's a little early for us to think about a serious relationship. Personally, I'm going to continue my studies in the near future. My dream is to become a doctor. I like endocrinology." Betty rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh no, I've had enough of studying. I've listened to enough brainwashing for 2 years. My main concern right now is getting my internship published. Betty stopped the class at half a word and looked at her friend expressively. Speaking of birds, do you know where we're going to be sent to do our hours? Lisa shrugged her shoulders, which meant she was indifferent to the question. Yes, I don't really care, but I've heard that our course assigns emergency hospitals and city clinics. It's not unusual. They do it every year. It'd be nice if they did. I heard some of the kids are going to be sent to the countryside. Relax, that's only for paramedics and dentists. By the way, Rob was also sent to the district hospital. Goldie laughed hilariously. And what will a budding dental technician do there? Get his hands on designing statutory jaws for old people. You're holding it in for nothing. You have a wrong idea about the people of the hinterland. My grandpa, FYI, lives in a place like this and enjoys our medical care. And last year he got new teeth, even though he spent all his savings on it. But he is satisfied. And the teeth look like real teeth. Now my grandfather eats everything with pleasure. He used to eat nothing but soup and cereal. You're lucky you have someone to visit. I have all my relatives concentrated in one place. It's not even interesting. As all hot topics were exhausted, the girls headed for the locker room. Betty was tidying her hair in front of the mirror and suddenly remembered the stunning news. We've been talking a lot, you and I, and the most important thing slipped my mind. Anyway, in case you didn't know, I'm authorized to tell you that we're planning a graduation celebration. You mean graduation, but that's a long way off. My friend was expertly applying raspberry-flavored gloss to her plump lips. No, that's not what I mean. People want to get together before their internships. After all, for us, the educational process is essentially over, and I'm a little sad. How do you feel about that idea? Positive. But depending on where and when to gather tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow will be known. But we got a campground in mind. It's not far from the city. Kathy's dad runs it. And when we leave at the beginning of May, everything falls out very well there, and the holiday weekend. So we're looking at 3 days of mind-blowing partying. And Kathy's dad promised us the lowest possible rate. Lisa's mood immediately dropped, and there was no escaping Betty's gaze. This change. What are you doing? Girlfriend's gone soft. Financial problems. Money's not the problem. It's something else. If it's just for 1 day, it's not a problem. But 3 days is a problem. You know my mom, Lisa, you're not a little girl anymore. Talk to your folks. Seriously, don't let them cut off your oxygen. I'll try, but I'm not sure they'll let me go. See for yourself. Lisa thought Betty was upset with her. She herself had berated herself for being insecure and not being able to stand up for herself. But she couldn't stand up to her parents either. And it wasn't even because she was still completely dependent on them. It was the traditional upbringing. Lisa was used to her father and mother deciding everything important in her life. Lisa was not wrong in her assumptions. As soon as she hinted at a possible trip out of town with a group of fellow students, Wendy immediately cut her off. Don't even think about it. You're not going anywhere. Lisa whimpered. Mom, well, why, I'm an adult, and I have the right to do it myself. I don't deny it. You have the right to do whatever you want. But you, daughter, you don't know what a roller coaster life is. I don't have anything against hanging out with friends, as long as it's an adult-supervised activity. Will you have a teacher with you? I don't know. Gold didn't say anything, but one of our girls' fathers works at the campground. One adult can't handle a whole bunch of right-wing kids. The girl's father, James, did not hear the beginning of the conversation, but caught the main point, decided to intervene. He addressed his wife, Wendy, in a joking tone. Maybe it's time to let your daughter go. I often get the impression that you keep Lisa like a dog on a short leash. The comparison angered the woman. James, don't you think you're hurting our girl even more with that comparison? Imagine what they're going to do on this very campground for 3 days. Wendy, but they're adults. You could say they're ready specialists. And then, we cannot with you, and you cannot guard our daughter for the rest of her life. Such control can have the most dire consequences. Lisa already knew in advance that her mother would be the winner. Her father always gave in to his wife, and he did it for the sake of peace in the family. So she didn't wait for the argument to end and went to bed. To be honest, she herself was not eager to go to unfamiliar places with a bunch of students. If there had been a flu in the company, then it would still be possible to grieve. But the girl's conscience was at ease, for she had made every effort to persuade Wendy. But in the morning, an unheard-of miracle occurred. Her mother herself came to her room and with a puzzled expression on her face said, "Daddy and I talked yesterday and decided that you could go away with your friends. You don't have to fight off the collective." The girl rushed to her mother and squealed with joy, "Mama, you are the best parents in the world. I promise to behave myself." Lisa immediately called Betty to make her friend happy. She had been walking in high spirits all day, but late in the evening, the joy was also suddenly cut short. Just as it came unexpectedly, the daughter received a call from Trevor. Wendy talked to her father for a few minutes and then called her daughter. "Lisa, the idea of you grandfather personally asks." No sooner had the girl picked up the phone from her mother than she heard the old man grumbling unhappily. "Lisa, why have you forgotten your grandfather? I'm sitting here alone in four walls, and I don't know what to do with myself." The girl tried to justify herself. "Well, I came 2 weeks ago. So, I was fine then. Now I'm suffering from blood pressure or something else. You're a doctor. You'd have come and diagnosed me correctly." "Okay, Grandpa, I'll come as soon as I get a chance. And you go to the clinic tomorrow. You have good doctors there." Trevor shouted into the phone. "Don't give me advice. I know where to go myself. Tell me, granddaughter, why should I go to hospitals when we have our own doctor in the family?" "Grandpa, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a nurse, and I haven't gotten my diploma yet." "I don't care. Some nurses are smarter than doctors. When I was in the hospital, they had such smart girls working there." Lisa was surprised at her grandfather's assertiveness. Trevor had never allowed himself such methods of influence before. The girl listened to his speech and her mother watched her. Finally, Lisa put the receiver down on the machine. Wendy asked her grandfather. The lady did not even expect such a thing from him. "It's not surprising. People change over the years, and our grandfather is 74. That's a very respectable age. What did Mom decide? Why are you asking so many questions? Of course I'm going to Grandpa's house. He's really lonely there. It's his own fault. If it weren't for his bad temper, how many times I've suggested he move to the city. But he won't even hear of it. Mom, there's something I don't know. Tell me, when you go to Grandpa's house, let him tell you his secrets. Believe me, he has so many secrets, you could write a whole book." Until that day, Lisa had never thought that her relatives might have secrets of their own. Her parents had told her a lot about their past. Grandpa liked to share memories too, but all those stories only reflected the part of their lives they were proud of. After her mother's carelessly thrown phrase, the girl realized that there was another part that they themselves did not want to remember. Trevor had a strong character, like any man used to a simple life. After the untimely death of his beloved wife, Miranda, he was left to grow old alone. At first it even suited him, but over the years it became increasingly difficult and dreary to live as a lone wolf. But most of all, he was worried about the thought that he might one day fall asleep and not wake up in his 2-room apartment. He reproached his daughters with this possible scenario. "You have all gone to different cities, and I'm the only one here. God forbid, I'll die. No one will ever know. They'll lie there for a year until the neighbors sound the alarm." Kelly's eldest daughter reacted strongly to such remarks. "Father, we've offered you so many times to move, and Wendy has good conditions. My husband and I have a big house, and we live alone now that the kids are gone. So your claims are unfounded." The old man wasn't going to back down. He was making his main argument. "I don't want to live in your penthouse. I'm used to my apartment." Kelly was shocked at the truth and her guess. "So you're suggesting that one of us drop everything and move in with you?" "Yes, that's exactly the format I'd like, and I don't see any obstacles to its realization." That's when Wendy had to step in. Daddy, it's okay that my sister and I have husbands and children. A normal husband should be able to understand the difficulties. I'd understand if you were married for the first year, but you've been married for 20 years. Kelly is already a grandmother herself. She could have moved in with her father, and at least give your men a break from you. It was useless to convince the old man that such a mode of life was unnatural. Trevor had not particularly considered the opinion of his girls before, and in his old age he began to ignore their problems, practically the same way he treated his grandchildren. Kelly had 2 sons, but grandfather did not think very highly of them. Every chance he got, he reproached them for not listening to his advice when they were young. When Sam and Anthony were small, the grandfather dreamed that his grandchildren, like himself, would work on the land. Agronomist is a very respected profession. Such specialists are always in demand. You, Sam, would be very well suited for such a job. But you, Anthony, you have a penchant for iron. I've been watching you. You'd make a good mechanic. But the boys disobeyed the oldest of the family. Sam became a lawyer. Anthony chose to become a structural engineer. Trevor was very worried. His daughters heard a lot of unflattering statements on this subject from him. Probably for 5 years, the storm raged in the soul of the old man did not subside. Grandchildren repeatedly tried to establish relations with grandfather, but he did not go to the peace, although gifts from them accepted. After the loss of confidence in the hairs on the male line, the center of love of the old man shifted to Lisa, and the desire of his only granddaughter Lisa to become a nurse finally melted the ice in Trevor's heart. After all, his late wife Miranda also devoted her whole life to medicine. Well done, Lisa. If your grandmother were alive right now, she'd be very happy. After all, my Miranda was the most respected person in our village. People came to her day and night for help, and she never said no to anyone, except she couldn't keep herself safe. Or is it my fault she left me so soon? At this point, Trevor usually fell into melancholy, and sometimes he shed a tear. This time his grandfather began with a reminiscence too, but beforehand he issued a series of rebukes. When Lisa rang the doorbell, the old man began to reprimand her from the doorstep. If I hadn't called, you wouldn't have come at all. Nobody lives in the same skin. The threads from the same cup from which I drink the bitterness of this life. Lisa knew it was best to keep quiet during Trevor's opening speech. She quietly threw off her light cloak, ignoring the grandfathers and lamentations, headed for the kitchen. Checking on the stove, pots, pans, the girl asked, "Food. What should I cook? Do you have groceries? Or should I run to the store?" Trevor immediately switched to a more pleasant topic. Further, if you do not bother to go to the store, buy there something at your discretion for a long time, and the real soup did not eat something. If memory serves me correctly, you're under Nina's supervision. An old man, looking down, Nina doesn't come to me anymore. I sent her away. Lisa looked at her grandfather with all her eyes. Grandfather, of course, I have no right to lecture you, but you can't do that. You had a woman assigned to you in social services. You kicked her out. Then your buddy's granddaughter took care of you. You said goodbye to her too. Now it's not you who's shown your aunt the door. How are you going to go on living? You can't be so unloved. Trevor listened to my granddaughter, head bowed low, scolding me. I can't help myself. That's the kind of temper I have. All because I'm green with boredom. I wish you'd move in with me. The girl hugged the old man. Grandpa, don't start. Because I'm torn right now. But imagine for a moment what I do here. Men with hope looked into the eyes of his granddaughter. But your grandmother worked here all her life and never complained. Lisa did not want to upset the old man with a sharp refusal and turned the conversation in a more positive direction. Okay, Grandpa, I'll run to the store, and then I'll make you your favorite soup. We still have plenty of time to talk. The girl headed into the cramped hallway, and the old man followed the family man, followed by his granddaughter. I almost forgot. Have you stopped by the drugstore yet? Buy me some joint ointment. I can't get out of bed in the morning. Trevor took some new bills out of the dresser. Get yourself something nice, too. I've been saving up for your arrival. You'll be at my place for a while." The old man looked at her with almost childlike hope, and Lisa realized that this was the question he was most concerned about. She kissed her grandfather. "And I'm coming to see you for a whole week, if you haven't escorted me out before." A smile shone on Trevor's face, and the girl thought how little it takes for a man to feel happy. After a hearty dinner, the old man finally approved. He sat in the kitchen and watched his granddaughter put things in order. In contrast to him, Lisa was not satisfied. Grandfather had only 2 weeks to get this year. It's not hard to wipe the dust once in a while. "I'm sorry, old man. I'm forgetting what I was doing and what I should be doing. You're the best instead of telling your grandfather off. Tell me, how's your young life?" The girl perfectly understood the trick of the grandfather, but decided to pretend that she did not notice it. "Yes, everything is fine. Soon the internship will begin, and then I'll get a diploma. But for that I need to prepare." The old man waved his hand impatiently. "Work and study are all fifths. You'd better tell me, how are you doing on the personal front? With whom? Or are you expecting a prince? Basically, I'm a grandfather. I don't believe in it for a long time, but maybe I have a good one. His name is Rob, and he's graduating from college this year too. Only he has a different major. He's a dental technician. Trevor with a tongue is a very good profession. Always a piece of bread and butter. Hang on to that kid. What kind of family does your Rob from?" Lisa was confused. She'd never inquired about her beau's lineage. "Grandpa, I didn't go into that kind of detail. All I know is that Rob has a brother who is a very unpleasant type. He goes to our college too, but I try to stay out of his way." The old man suddenly perked up. "Why is that? Where did the antipathy come from?" Lisa blushed. She didn't want to tell the unpleasant story that happened at the disco in February, but the old man guessed it himself. "He was hitting on you." "Sort of, but I solved it quickly. Max and Rob are cousins. Betty, my girlfriend, said their moms are." "For what reason?" "I don't know. I don't need to know. Granddaughter's not always lucky enough to have relatives." "You don't know. I had a brother too." Trevor sighed heavily and thought. By the strained expression on his face, the girl realized that she shouldn't pester her grandfather with questions. The thought flashed in her head that if he wanted to, he would tell her himself. But the old man, holding his back, left the kitchen. "I'm going, granddaughter. I'm going to lie down my joints. I'm going to use the ointment you brought." Trevor disappeared into the bedroom and didn't show up until late afternoon. Lisa decided to take advantage of the opportunity to clean up the big room. She opened the balcony and the door, and fresh air rushed into the room. Trying not to make any noise, the girl dusted and laid out, scattered on chairs and armchairs, grandfather's things on the shelves of the closet. She didn't even notice how it started to get dark outside and was about to close the door to the balcony. How did the disgruntled landlord show up? "Lisa, you wanted to kill me too. You let in a draft. My whole body is already aching." "Grandpa, but you were resting. You could break your legs here. Don't exaggerate, because from your words it turns out that I'm the last one. It's cold here. Let's go to the kitchen. You put the kettle on, and I'll tell you about my brother. To be honest, I haven't been interested in his fate for a long time. I don't even know if he's alive or dead. Probably the latter. Andrew is 5 years older than me. He must be in his 80s now, if he's still alive." Aromatic tea, beautifully flavored by the cup, was shared on the table, and Lisa, holding her breath, listened to the unusual love story that made siblings enemies forever. Trevor and Andrew's parents were simple people. Ben went through the entire war and was only lightly wounded once. Returning home, he went about his usual business, laboring from dawn to dusk in the field. At that time, there was a catastrophic shortage of equipment, and mechanizers themselves repaired tractors at night and went out to the field in the morning. Ben's wife worked on the farm, so the older children were responsible for the younger kids. But Andrew did not like this division of responsibilities, and he could not wait until the end of school. True, the parents did not oppose the desire of the eldest son to get an education. On the contrary, they praised their son's success in front of all acquaintances and neighbors. Our Andrew will definitely become a boss. He is such a serious guy, not like Trevor. Listening to such speeches, the younger brother was angry. The boy wanted to prove to the whole world, and especially to his older brother, that he was not worse than him. This competitive process lasted for several years, but Andrew was still more successful. After the institute, he returned to his native village, and he was immediately appointed deputy chairman of the state farm. The young specialist openly boasted of his position, trying to prick his younger brother, who together with his father fought in the field for Trevor's harvest. They were immediately taken into the army for the very reason that there was a shortage of people who could operate machinery so easily. The shortage of personnel was also affected by the consequences of the past war. Only at the age of 23 the guy was called up for service. Then he spent 3 whole years mastering the military business in the Baltic Fleet, and after demobilization he returned home. During Trevor's service in his native village, there were serious changes. There was a new 2-story club, and it was now possible to get to the village on a smooth asphalt road. There were changes in the family, too, as my mother told me at once. Our Andrew was going to get married. You had just been taken to the service. Like us, they sent a paramedic and after school. Miranda's name. Good girl. At first, Trevor didn't pay any attention to the news. He himself was burning with impatience to meet the girl who had seen him off and had been writing letters for almost 3 years. But his mother looked pityingly at her son. Hush, you don't have to go to Nancy. The boy was surprised. Mom, what are you doing? I've been waiting all 3 years for this day. The woman repeated stubbornly. I'm telling you not to go. Nancy, you got married and went to town. I guess she wanted to hide from the shame. I didn't expect such a trick from her. She was like a daughter to me. She used to visit us almost every day. And then she stopped. For almost 6 months, Trevor suffered this personal tragedy. He became withdrawn and even talked to his parents only when necessary. But one day the mechanic sent him into town. Trevor needs to get some spare parts for the machinery urgently from the warehouse. So I'm giving you my car for this purpose. But you must realize that every day counts. So make sure you get it done quickly. Trevor is accustomed to fulfill the assigned task and immediately went to the mountains. What was the guy's surprise when at the very warehouse where he was supposed to get the necessary parts for repair, he met the same Nancy, who did not wait for him. A wedding ring glowed on the young woman's finger, and this burned fire into Trevor's heart. He looked his former lover in the eyes for a long time. Then he asked, "Why didn't you write to me? It would have been fairer than marrying in secret." Nancy suddenly burst into tears. "Forgive me. Hush, my hasty marriage was a necessity. I had no other choice. So can you at least tell me now what happened? I'm not going to interfere with your family life, but at least I need to know the reason for your infidelity. You'll see. It's better if you don't know. I still don't understand how it happened." And the girl's frightened story, often interrupted by sobs. Trevor realized that his personal happiness had been interfered with by his older brother. When Trevor left for the service, Andrew courted Nancy for a long time, but their dates were secret, and no one knew about the fact that the older brother had stolen the bride from the younger. Nancy kept waiting for Andrew to propose. But then the beautiful Miranda appeared, and the lover began to avoid the girl. Nancy was ready to come to terms with her fiancé's betrayal, but to her horror she realized that she was expecting a child. Time flew inexorably, and she had to act decisively. One day the girl springs Andrew in a secluded place to tell him that he will be a father. But the man recoiled from her. "Nancy, leave me out of this. It can't be. After all, you and I have only twice had an unknown child by you." Such reproaches were painful to hear. And the unhappy girl begged Andrew, "I had no one before you. You know that very well. I'm pregnant with you." But these pleas and tears did not hurt the guy. He also ruthlessly threw in the girl's face. "Your tears, Nancy, will not help. You yourself know very well that I cannot marry you." Nancy seemed as if her heart had left her body. "Why, Andrew?" "Nancy, what kind of silly questions are these? First of all, I can't marry my brother's girl. Second of all, I already have fiancés. You may have heard that I'm dating Miranda. And we're getting married soon." Nancy froze in place. Andrew was gone from her life forever. For weeks, the girl didn't leave the house and her parents feared for her health. She searched for a way out of the situation, but found no good solution. Nancy confided to Trevor that she had the urge to lay hands on herself. Had it not been for Jacob, she would have carried out that intention. But this guy, whom Trevor knew well, convinced the girl not to go to the extreme step. To me, or I had once proposed to marry him, and I agreed. We moved to the city right after the wedding. Trevor was worried about the most important question and the child where. Nancy started crying again. Perhaps it's all my own fault, or is it heaven's punishment? The boy was not born alive. All the way back, I silently thought only about what a bastard his own brother turned out to be. After all, he is, in fact, maimed to the wall of life. Now this cheerful girl is more like a mummy. He did not yet know what he would do, but he was firmly convinced that he would find a way to take revenge on his brother. Apparently, the heavens were also on his side. Just the day after the trip to town, Trevor accidentally injured his arm while repairing his tractor. Blood gushed from the open wound, and the men carried the lad to the dispensaries. From the mere sight of the wound, Trevor began to shake, but the paramedic reassured him to be patient. "My dear, now I treated your wound, and then for the neck." And Miranda took up the needle. The guy passed out. I had to bring him back to consciousness. When he woke up, the girl was surprised. Usually men don't faint at the sight of blood. "And you passed out right away." Trevor was ashamed. "I'm sorry, I didn't expect it myself. I saw a lot of scares when I was in the Navy, but this is the first time it's happened to me. It's probably a reaction to the massive bleeding." "Are you dizzy? Nauseous?" "To be honest, I really don't feel well. I was pretty nervous yesterday. My instructions are to send you to the hospital." "Trevor, there's no need to resist. I'm resilient. I'll be as good as new tomorrow." "All right, let's see what happens tomorrow, but we'll make a deal that you go home right now and go to bed." "Well, I can't. I got a job. I can't talk about work until you're fully recovered. I'll write you a note. And now I'll call your brother. Andrew is your older brother." Miranda kept her promise, and 10 minutes later, Andrew arrived at the paramedic station. But instead of words of sympathy, Trevor received a torrent of insults. The older brother shouted at him, not choosing expressions. "You idiot, you fool. The Almighty rewarded me with a brother. Admit it, did you do it on purpose to spite me? Now they're gonna use me in every meeting. Okay, if it was just about me, you've put our entire household in jeopardy. They're going to start proceedings now. They'll send a commission to rule that we're not following safety procedures." Miranda tried to stop Andrew's fiancé. "What are you talking about? Your brother's in trouble. And instead of sympathizing with him, you insult the man. Such a misfortune could have happened to anyone, and to you too." Big Brother first said to Miranda in a strange tone, "Stop covering up the headiness, and in general, I think it is inappropriate to breed calves whose tenderness here." No sooner had the door closed behind the window than the parents burst into the paramedic station. The mother began to wail beside her son, and Ben offered Trevor assistance, leaning on me. "Let's go home. You're scary to look at. White as a sheet." The paramedic escorted them to the exit and warned them to be sure to come back tomorrow for dressing. Trevor was on sick leave for almost 3 weeks. He went to the dressings every day and marveled at Miranda's ability to perform manipulations quickly and skillfully. They had a lot in common, and they could talk about nothing for a long time. But one day this idyll was interrupted by Andrew. The older brother burst into the medical station during a routine procedure with a solemn look. He declared, which is exactly what I needed to prove. Caught you in the act. Sitting courtesy of Miranda didn't have to listen to reproach. Andrew, leave the medical office. Are you interrupting my work? I'm already getting in your way. Well, Miranda, I declare to you with all responsibility that I will not allow you to corrupt the population. I will report your unbecoming behavior to your superiors today. What are you doing in the workplace? Trevor's arm wasn't quite healed yet, but he wasn't afraid to stand up for the girl. Andrew, I don't care if you're the boss. If you don't clean this up right now, I'm gonna kick your ass. Perhaps it was this determination of the younger brother that brought Andrew back to earth. He looked angrily first at the girl, then at Trevor. You still got it in for me. I don't forgive those who humiliate me. Andrew walked away. They sat in confusion for a long while longer. Trevor was the first to break the silence. Martin, don't worry. It's all just threats. I know my brother. He won't go beyond words. Andrew, he's just trying to play tough. In reality, he's not calculating, and he won't go for it. Trevor was not wrong in his predictions. Andrew, he only made promises. The next day, he showed up at the paramedic station apologizing. My dear, I'm sorry. I overreacted. I said a lot of mean things. It's all my brother's fault. He used to turn me on with his antics when I was a kid. The girl didn't even turn around. But when the man wanted to approach her, she firmly said, Andrew, don't come near me. It's over between us. And it is good that you showed your nature before the wedding. You are not a good man, and I am afraid of you. The rejected suitor collapsed on his knees. Mart, I'm sorry. It was a momentary lapse of judgment. Any man can lose his temper. No, not anyone. I'll be honest with you. I didn't expect this from you. And no need for theatrics here. It won't change anything. Humiliated by Andrew's refusal, he left and never showed up at the paramedic station again. A month later, Trevor and Martin married at the village hall. The newlyweds did not plan to leave the village, but Andrew did not keep his word and began to take revenge on his brother. So the young family was forced to move to a neighboring region. In the new place, they were welcomed with open arms. And 5 years later, they received an apartment in a new house. Lisa was shocked by her grandfather's revelation. She had no idea what trials this man had to go through. After all, it must be very hard to disown your own brother. Trevor looked at his granddaughter with an inquisitive gaze. Do you mean to ask if I was looking for a meeting with Andrew? The girl only nodded in agreement, and the grandfather concluded his tale. Perhaps it is cruel, but I did not want to see him. My greatest fear then was that it was you in the image of my brother. From the life of another girl. Soon, Andrew got into big trouble at work and left. He wrote to his parents, but I didn't read those letters. Then things started to change in the country. And as far as I know, the brother became a businessman. A cry of pain in my lower back. The old man took a thick album out of the dresser drawer. At first I had the urge to burn all the pictures of my brother, but then I changed my mind. Look here, we were photographed together on my shipment. Lisa carefully took the yellowed old snapshots in her hands. You two look so much alike. Yes, my granddaughter even confused us sometimes, but 5 years of age difference is still a big deal. Grandfather, be honest, if you had the chance, you'd like to see your brother. The old man lowered his head again, as if on a clean floor. There was an answer to this important question. I don't even know, Lisa, what to tell you. I've been thinking a lot about my past life and my present life. I guess I could forgive Andrew now. In my heart, I forgave him a long time ago. And as for seeing him, I don't think he's alive. My parents died, and I never found out. Where's the brother? Grandpa, after this conversation, as if immediately by nickname Lisa, even worried about his state of health. But the next day, Trevor already complained about the life of neighbors and inattention of daughters. So the girl decided that it was better not to bring back his memories. The beginning of practice was marked by one not quite pleasant event. Golden was sent to the regional hospital and Lisa to the city polyclinic. But the unpleasant situation was that there also got the hated Lola. Max has already managed to get used to the department of the medical institution and decided to conduct a tour for the girls. The guy met them at the entrance and looked at Lisa with undisguised gloating. I want to advise you young girls not to show your character here. The polyclinic has a long-established team, and the old-timers are reluctant to accept newcomers into their ranks. That's why the main rule here is to keep a low profile. Lola cheerfully noted Max not to stir up mud. Such problems are eliminated. Just need to cover a good field, and everything will be tip-top. There is not a single case of refusal of freebies in history. Lisa had been stunned before by a classmate's language, and she couldn't keep her mouth shut. Lola, if you're going to communicate with patients in your own language, you're going to need an interpreter. Lola, as usual, looked down at Lisa. Are you the smartest? Or are you showing off for Max? Maybe it bothers you that I'm dating him. The girl calmly answered neither. I don't care about Max at all. I'm more concerned with practice now, and I know well the public that visits the clinics. They are mostly old people, children, and women. Eka, Ms. Know-It-All. Personally, I can do without your consultation, and in fact, I do not plan to stay here for a month. She promised to arrange for me to spend the entire internship at his friend's clinic. Lola and Max moved on down the corridor, and Lisa decided to leave the company. The young man asked Lisa, "What are you standing there for? Let's catch up." "Thank you, but I'd rather walk the floors myself. It'll be safer for everyone." "Lola, meet me at the superintendent's office." The girl reached the end of the long corridor, and she completely lost the desire to go up to the third floor. She went back and waited for the head of the department to appear. Soon, the intern noticed. Energetically stride along the corridor stocky middle-aged man. He was smiling. "Oh, a new addition. We've been waiting for you for a long time. We have a critical shortage of specialists at our stations. Nurses have to work in emergency mode and serve 2, and sometimes even 3 sites." The head opened the door of his office. "Come in and let's get acquainted." He extended his hand to Lisa. Lisa made a reciprocal gesture. "Lisa, I'm not the only one who was referred to you. There's another girl coming in now." "That's fine. There's no time for a warm-up. So we're going to assign you to experienced sisters right away. Your job is to listen to your mentors. Do what they say, but we're sure there won't be any problems. After all, you and without 5 minutes ready nurses." The head's optimistic speech was interrupted by the appearance of Lola. She slipped neatly through the open door and asked angrily for Lisa. "Sorry, I'm a little late. I was familiarizing myself with the polyclinic." Nick repeated what Lisa had said. But Lola listened to the superintendent inattentively and even tried to make eyes at him. But the man did not pay attention to the flirtation of the brightly painted girl. He only warned girls we have a very different environment here. Therefore, I ask you to dress in full compliance with the requirements of our institution, and bright makeup is not welcome here either. Lola poked, but said nothing. Nick called for the head nurse. Not more than a minute after his call, and a stately woman of about 45 years old entered the office with a brisk gait. "Yes, Nick." The superintendent briefly recounted to the assistant. "What is her task?" "Adriana, I would like to ask you to help the girls to settle in. Hopefully, they will like our clinic and express their desire to stay with us." The head nurse smiled welcomingly. "Let's go, girls. I'll bring you up to speed, and then together with me you'll go to the action zone." The new Adriana looked at her carefully again. "I said something wrong." Lola poked forward into her lower lip, signifying the highest degree of her displeasure. "I have the impression that we are not in a medical facility, but in a soldier's barracks." The head nurse took the girls under her arms, but before doing so, she closed the door of the chief's office tightly. "That's what my dear girls nail on your pretty insects, that in any medical institution, the main thing is discipline and subordination. That's why we have a regimen akin to the army. If someone doesn't like it, you should change careers before it's too late. I understand what I'm saying." Lola lowered her eyes, but her plump lips continued to whisper something. Lisa had to answer for 2. "I understand, Adriana. Good. Then the young guard will follow me. A quarter of an hour later, they were already sitting in the car, and the nurse was voicing the plan of further actions. So, my girls, I have assigned you to the areas where I am now temporarily replacing the nurses. Your appointments will begin this evening. Before that, we need to make a round of the bedridden patients, mostly elderly people who need special care. Lola blurted out, and we were told in college that all patients should be treated equally. Adriana gave Lola another unkind look. You must not have been listening very well. In medicine, we practice an individual approach, and district nurses have to be a bit of a psychologist. Lola poked out of habit, and the mentor decided to put the insolent trainee in her place. Girl, are you all right with your health? Lola stammered, sort of all right. Why did you ask? Snorts. How were you in the stall? And that's a sign of an upper respiratory problem. Maybe you have maxillary sinusitis. It's a disease that's dangerous to the patient and to others. Get it checked out just in case. Lisa wanted to show her support for the head nurse with a standing ovation, but she only smirked and looked at Adriana gratefully. The woman understood the look and smiled too. Lola did not utter another word. For over 3 hours, they drove around the city, and Adriana talked about every sick person they visited. Some she took their blood pressure, others she gave them an injection. Memorize, girls. Are you going to go to those addresses tomorrow? We're almost there. We only have one last address left. It's the highlight of our program. So please, nothing too much, including inappropriate emotions. They pulled up to a nice 2-story mansion. The driver signaled, and the gates began to slowly open. Noticing the surprised faces, the trainee, Adriana, explained, Our Andrew lives in this house. A very important person in the past, a successful businessman, and even a bit of a scientist. I don't know all of them, but I think he even has state awards for special contributions. The old man is very unhealthy, you could say conflicted. He has diabetes and a bunch of other ailments. The door was opened by an elderly woman. Noticing the head nurse, she nodded affably. Already she's nervous, saying you're late, and Adriana paid no attention to the woman's remark. Our old man has a small staff of servants. His son and his family used to live with him, but he literally chewed up his relatives, and they left. Now he's on his own. He pours out his discontent on anyone who comes to hand. Lisa expected to see an old man almost dying, but in the office the desk was piled with books and newspapers. Sitting there was an elderly man in a velvet house robe. At their appearance, he adjusted his expensive rimmed glasses. Ah, you're the one. You're late today. I already checked the sugar myself. Adriana put the emergency suitcase on the nightstand. You're a real unicum, Andrew. There's traffic everywhere. We've joined in a little bit. We're gonna take you now. Okay, I'll forgive you for the first time, but I hope it doesn't happen again. The man looked at the trainees incredulously. Who are these young ladies? Yum Cadres. It's good to have someone to pass on experience to. I also try to make the most of it. My time is allotted to me. The man looked at his desk. I wanted to write memoirs at first, but then I thought that someone would start digging into my biography and change my mind. I decided to gather all my experience in agriculture into a single whole. Yeah, I'm a loner. Don't be surprised. I've been involved in some of these things. The old man tried to flirt with the head nurse, but he did it awkwardly, unexpectedly. He rolled his eyes and started pushing himself to the floor. Lola squealed in fear, and Lisa managed to pick up the splintered neck of the body because she was closest to the old man. Adriana threw towards Lola an unkind look. Girl, you better get out. We don't need panickers here. Lisa was not distracted by her surroundings. She carefully laid the man on the carpet and turned his head on its side, then took hold of his wrist. No pulse visible and a faint filling. Adriana squatted down next to the intern. Sometimes our Andrew has attacks like this, but no matter how much we persuade him, he won't go to the hospital. The head nurse filled a syringe with medicine and gave the patient an injection. The old man breathed more evenly and slowly opened his eyes. I don't even want to hear about hospitalization. I'll die at home. It's a little early. You're talking about dying. You've still got the kind of energy that would make any young person jealous. The women picked up the old man and led him to the couch. Taking the opportunity, the man reminded Adriana of his long-standing request. Sinchenko, you never sent me a good nurse. Or have you completely forgotten about my request? Andrew, how can you say that when I sent you 5 people? They're inexperienced. One of them can't do anything, and the other one forgets to wash her hands. And I have a weak body. I could get an infection. And then what? The old man became agitated, and his breathing increased again. Lisa sat down next to him. You need to rest now, or you'll pass out again. Can I get you some water? Yeah, if it's not too much trouble, there's water in the carafe of cookies. I don't drink poison from the tap. They've polluted the environment. Now you can easily get poisoned by plain water. Lisa brought water. The old man drank small sips and kept looking at the girl. Quench your thirst. He handed the glass back to her and turned to Adriana. She's a nice girl, and she has a pleasant appearance. That's the kind of nurse I'd like to have around. The main nurse is confused. Andrew, Lisa, we've only got her first day of internship. She doesn't have her diploma yet. What does a diploma have to do with anything? That girl has a positive energy about her. One visit from her is soothing. Lisa made eye contact with the head nurse. What's wrong with that offer? Adriana threw such matters out of the window. Lisa will do her allotted hours at the clinic, and then she will do her internship at the hospital. Okay, we're late for our appointment. The old man said goodbye to them and promised I'd try to solve the problem myself. Lola was waiting for them in the car. She was silent all the way back to the clinic, only at the end of the way. When they drove onto the overpass, she hissed with the same anger. You're doing a great job, turning your whole hide inside out. Lisa replied in the same tone. Are you in pain? You should show what you can do. I muttered in confusion. When that old man collapsed on the floor, I myself was frightened and almost collapsed. If you panic from such events, the only place for you to work is the registrar's office. Lola looked at Lisa with interest, and her eyes were alive and sparkling. Listen, that's not a bad idea. Sit by the window and smile at everyone. A crowd had already gathered around the office to which Adriana had directed them. But Lola sat on the couch for 3 hours with an indifferent look, and no one paid any attention to her because everyone wanted to get out of the line and go home as soon as possible. Almost every 5 minutes, the doctor would send the intern somewhere for tests or for the result of someone else's cardiogram. By evening, Lisa's feet were burning. She barely made it to the apartment and collapsed on the couch. Wendy leaned over and touched her lips to her daughter's forehead. Lisa, you don't look well, but you don't seem to have a fever. The girl smiled. Mommy, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just that I ran so many kilometers in a day that even my legs are twitching. Wendy covered her daughter with a blanket and went to the kitchen. From there, she yelled. Grandpa called. Asked how you were doing. I said I was fine. Tired and all over my body. Lisa herself did not notice how she fell asleep. Images of the past day flashed before her eyes. But at the center of the mosaic was the old man she had given first aid to. The thought flashed through my mind, who this grandfather reminded me so much of. It was already dark outside the window when her mother gently woke her up and called her to dinner. She told her parents about all of today's adventures and forgot to describe the special patient. The next morning, Lisa barely crossed the threshold of the polyclinic. She was summoned to the office of the head of the clinic. Noticing that the trainee got worried, the head nurse patted her on the shoulder. Don't worry, beautiful. You distinguished yourself yesterday, and it became known to the superiors. In short, go to the head. He will explain everything to you. The girl knocked on the door with a sinking heart. Nick greeted her like an old acquaintance. Come in, Lisa, sit down. We will have a long conversation with you. The man began to state the essence of the case 100 by 100, nodding on the table with a pencil. I have no right to order you around and can only ask one favor. Lisa tensed and quietly mumbled, I've done something wrong. The superintendent smiled. What is it about this actress? On the contrary, Adriana spoke very highly of you, and one of our patients, you won him over in a heartbeat. You mean the old guy we saw yesterday? Him. Very mean grandpa loves to make complaints about everyone. He's made complaints about us too, but there's nothing we can do about it. Our vocation is to treat the sick, regardless of their peculiarities. Anyway, Andrew liked you very much, and he demanded that we send you to be his nurse. The girl was surprised, but that's not possible. I have to work hours in the hospital on the ambulance and in other units. The superintendent put his pencil aside. I think we can settle this matter if you agree to a special mission. You see, Lisa, our patient is not a simple man. He has a special merit, and he's manipulating it. It's useless to fight him. It's better to submit. But in my practice, I have to account for every day, so you don't have to worry about that. We'll sign everything and thank you separately, if that's okay. Then I agree. Nick is happy. Thank you, colleague. Then you will take up your duties as of today. Lisa headed for the door, still not fully understanding what had happened. But the superintendent stopped her and forgot to tell you the most important thing. There are some costs to being a caregiver, so you'll be able to recover some of them. Mostly moral. Lisa went to a familiar address. She was greeted by the same silent housekeeper. The woman didn't even say hello, just nodded toward the stairs. He's waiting. Andrew she found in the men's bedroom and lay in bed, covering her eyes and sighing heavily. At the girl's appearance, the sighs increased. Lisa came closer. Hello, I was asked to look after you. The old man's voice was cheerful. Asked by whom? It was me who asked, because you have a professional streak in you. I've had a lot of lame asses sent to me before. I'm not feeling well today. I should take your blood pressure and check your sugar. Then a neck massage would be nice. I hope they taught you how to massage. The patient kept asking questions, and Lisa had no time to answer them. After the standard medical procedures, Andrew wanted to get some fresh air. Lisa, there's a stroller down there. Would you be so kind as to bring my transportation up here? I don't have any energy today. They walked in the garden for over an hour. And the old man didn't just want to breathe the fresh air. He demanded to be taken to one corner of the territory and then to another. During the movement, he was happy to tell the girl about his scientific work. I am an agronomist by basic education, but I did not work in my specialty. For many years, all sat in responsible positions. And then, when the whole world turned upside down and bosses joined the ranks of the unemployed, I decided to go into business. You could even say that I was one of the leaders of this movement. I won't hide it. Luck didn't smile on me right away. Twice I ruined everything to nothing. Only later, when it turned out that the light was forever extinguished in my window, I remembered about my diploma Lizhinka in this garden, all the results of my work. Of course, I was not alone in creating new varieties of vegetables, flowers, and fruit crops. I was helped by like-minded people. During the walk, Lisa learned a lot of interesting things, but the constant tension had a strong effect on the girl's health, and by the end of the day, she could hardly move her legs. On reaching home, the girl collapsed on the sofa again. Wendy was worried. Daughter, what kind of patient did you get? Probably an energy vampire. Leave him, he'll take all your strength. But the girl didn't listen to her mother's advice. The first week was difficult, but she survived the ordeal and even got used to the quirks a little. Andrew. The old man then pretended to be terminally ill and refused to walk on his own, then jogged in the park. At the end of the week, the patient paid off the young nurse. When Lisa counted the money in the envelope, she thought, for this kind of reward, I'm willing to put up with a couple more months. But the older man had a very different calculation. One day he said to Lisa, Lisa, you suit me in every way. I would very much like to have you in my house all the time. The girl wanted to refuse such a tempting offer, but the old man beat her to it. Don't be so quick to say no. I'm not just offering you this alliance for no reason, and for a certain remuneration. I've managed to insert a nurse. Andrew, I'm not really interested in money. And then I have a family and a boyfriend I'm going to marry. Tears glistened in the old man's eyes. Family. Such a small word and so succinct. I had a family a long time ago too, but I was too young. And for me there were very different reference points. Lezginka, if you don't mind, go to my office and bring a notebook with memoirs written on it. At one time I even counted myself in the ranks of geniuses, but then I realized that I am just like everyone else, no more than an ordinary unhappy old man. This lengthy monologue of the ward left a disturbing feeling in the girl's soul. It seemed to her that she had already heard such arguments, but there was no time to strain her memory. And Lisa went to run errands. Andrew's office was not gloomy. That's because the heavy curtains were pulled tightly as the girl walked past the shelves of books. She accidentally touched this light construction, and a photograph in an antique frame fell on the floor. In the semi-darkness, it was impossible to make out the image, and she placed the picture at random on one of the hangings. Not without difficulty, Lisa found a large leather-bound notebook on the table labeled Memoirs. She thought that Andrew was about to read out excerpts from this work to her, but the old man went deeper into reading, and she was sent home. Lisa, you may be dismissed. I shall expect you tomorrow morning as usual. The girl had no sooner reached home than she remembered where she had seen exactly the same picture. There was no complete certainty yet. After all, the old man's study was dark. It only seemed to her that there was a resemblance. She thought she'd find out tomorrow. I think I should carefully sneak into the study and reread the memoirs of my special patient. At the threshold of the apartment, she bumped into her mother. Wendy was surprised to see you early today. Your grandfather is fine. By the way, your own grandfather called and expressed his displeasure. I support him. Instead of looking after other people's relatives, you should look after your own. Her mother's emotional remarks again caused concern. Somewhere in a remote corner of her brain there was a thought that the girl could not grasp. For days, Lisa had been trying to catch a good moment to get into Andrew's office, but it was as if the old man sensed it and gave her different errands, which took a lot of time. Only on Saturday, he felt weak again and went to bed. The nurse settled down next to him. We took his blood pressure every hour. When she noticed that he was dozing off, the girl tiptoed out of the bedroom and into the study. She pulled back the curtains as she approached the shelving unit. Immediately, she was stunned. It was the exact same picture as her grandfather's. Oh my God. How did I not realize Andrew was my grandfather's brother? Lisa rushed to the table, where a thick notebook with a detailed biography of the old man was still lying in a prominent place. But at that moment there were footsteps behind them, and a familiar voice said with condemnation how unkind it was to rummage through other people's things. And I thought so highly of you. The owner of the house stood leaning on his cane and stared at the nurse. I guess you and I will have to part. That's a pity. The man turned, but Lisa with despair. Andrew exclaimed, Wait, I'll explain everything to you now. The old man froze in place. What did you call me, Andrew? How do you know? My real name. He turned again and slowly approached the girl. Bug. I didn't realize. Have you had a chance to study my memoirs? No, I haven't even drawn them to your notebook. I only looked at that picture over there because the old man's face turned stony with tension. He was worried, and Lisa was afraid he might have another attack. He tapped his cane demandingly. Why didn't you say something? You're talking. I'm giving you one last chance to justify your ugly deed. Lisa herself approached the old man and, looking him straight in the eye, said slowly, Andrew, I am your brother Trevor's granddaughter. You haven't forgotten that you have a brother. The nurse had expected anything but such a reaction. The old man was outraged. He's the one who sent you to me on purpose. I don't want to hear anything about him. He ruined my life, took my fiancée from me, thanks to my brother. I'm a miserable existence now, and no one cares about me." This outburst of emotion drained the old man of his last strength. He collapsed in his chair and sobbed. Lisa did not know what to do. She was afraid to approach the man, lest she make him even more angry. But Andrew himself commanded, "What are you standing there for? Your eyes are bulging. See, I'm not well in Capri. Take some drops of sedative. And get some water to drink." The girl rushed to carry out the order, while one thought was pounding in her head. What should I do next? The old man took the medicine and closed his eyes. Lisa stood next to him, afraid to move. "Why are you standing there like a dead man? Do you think I believe in your fairy tales? Admit it. You're a con artist. You've been trying to gain my trust on purpose so you could inherit my estate. I know the type, but I'm not fooled." That kind of accusation pissed the girl off. "What the hell do I need your mansion for? I'm already regretting that I met you. My grandfather and his tricks are not enough for me. Now you've fallen on my head. I've had enough. Find yourself another nurse." Lisa was relieved to have said all her grievances to the old man's face. She rushed out of the office, but the owner's voice came from behind her. "Lisa, wait. Why are you so quick to take offense? I didn't say anything bad to you. Stop it." The old man caught up with her at the stairs. The most surprising thing was that he moved briskly without using his cane. "I didn't even realize you had a temper. It's our breed. Ak, you're hot. So you say it, Trevor. The girl is barely alive. He told me everything. And why you quarreled. And why you cannot forgive each other. He told me about Nancy, too." The old man waved his hands vigorously. Then everything passed, flew away, and was forgotten. Just lyrics. "You'd better tell me where he's holed up." "He lives in a village outside the city. Miranda, my grandmother died long ago, and my grandfather is only one, and as mean as you. Now, I believe that character is passed on by genes. Let's save the high theories for later. I'm pretty good at genetics myself. That's not what concerns me." The man paused and asked confusedly, "Do you think we should not meet? That's for you to decide." "All right, I'll think about it. You call right away today." Lisa is very tired. After all the upheavals of this unusual day, it was even difficult for her to move her tongue. She mumbled something indistinctly and hurried to leave the house. But the old man from above shouted, "Lisa, you're not going to leave me after everything that's transpired. You'll come back tomorrow. I'll give you a raise next week." The girl stumbled to the bus stop. She mentally berated herself. "Why did I get involved in this story? Now my grandfathers will drink all the juice out of me. There was one, and now there are two." Her parents had already had dinner. Wendy put a plate of vermicelli and a cutlet in front of her, and Lisa ate, picking at it with her fork, and her mother watched her. "What's wrong again? You can't take everything to heart. It'll burn so fast. If that mean old man's bothering you again, you should dump him. Mom, it's not just a patient, it's Grandpa's missing sibling." Wendy opened her mouth in surprise. "Andrew, that's the one. Can you believe it? Living practically next door to each other and not seeing each other for half a century. I thought stories like that only happened in movies and novels." "Daughter, what are we gonna do? Now I'm thinking about it myself. We have to tell grandfather first, and then we'll decide. We'll consult with your father. He has a clearer mind than you and me." After a family meeting, the three of them decided that it would be better to organize the meeting with the consent of both parties. Lisa insisted on it because she was afraid that two old people might not be able to bear the shock of the meeting. But she could not foresee what happened afterwards. On the agreed day, James went to the village in the morning to pick up his father-in-law. It turned out that Trevor was not ready yet. The son-in-law began to wait patiently when he would bring himself in order. But the old man began to interrogate him. "James, why didn't Lisa show up herself? She's at work. I thought you said Andrew had a nurse on the books. Yeah, well, that's her job. I mean, it's a practicum. So the granddaughter I've devoted so much to is grooming this scumbag. James realized that the brothers' reunion was about to be derailed, so he decided to yell at his grandfather. Trevor, you asked to go to your brother's house, and now you're going to leave. I think it's time we put aside our past feuds and grudges. It's been half a century. This reprimand had an effect on the old man, and he puffed unhappily and went out into the living room. James, if I look like this suit, my brother's an oligarch. He'll laugh at a simple tractor driver. Anticipating a new round of discontent, the man cried out, "Oh my God, this song is good. Start again." Finally, the car pulled away from the driveway, and Trevor froze in the back seat. In an hour or so, James and his relative aboard made it to the other end of town, where Lisa and her ward were already waiting impatiently for them. Everyone at the meeting was anxious, and it was noticeable. Trevor got out of the car and looked around first. Yeah, the brothers waving his chorus. It's not like we just gave them all 30 squares in an apartment. With Lisa's help, the older brother also took a closer look at the guest and went out on the front porch, even giving up a bone for the occasion. Lisa, put that away. I don't want Trevor to think I'm helpless. The girl silently accepted the aid and helped her ward down the steps. Andrew did not hold back from making a visual comment. Actually, a lot of honor for him. But okay, I only tolerate myself. I don't know why I'm doing all this. James, or from behind, watched as the old men walked towards each other. With each step, the distance between them was shrinking, and it seemed like they were about to embrace. And that would be the end of the era of brotherly enmity. But the elderly men stopped, not daring to take the last step. The younger brother coldly said, "I didn't expect to see you alive. Do mole that you died a long time ago." But Andrew didn't put words in his pocket either. Likewise, brother didn't expect to see you alive either. But I'm glad. I must admit I'm not very glad. I've long since gotten used to not having anyone. Lisa realized that everything was about to fall apart with her and her father right in front of her eyes. She gathered all of her grandfather's talent. Please don't fight right now. It's such an unusual day. It's been so long since you've seen each other, hasn't it? Trevor didn't let his granddaughter finish. Lisa, who are you in front of now? You've traded me for that rascal. Don't you realize he's taking revenge on me after half a century? I'm right, Andrew. Lisa's patient didn't understand what the guest was accusing him of. Trevor, what are you talking about, brother? Are you planning to win my only granddaughter to your side with your wealth to avenge Martha? Trevor, you're out of your mind. You must have been stung by a poisonous bee this morning. I waited for you like a man, like a brother, and you're on my doorstep hurling insults at me. Go away. I don't want to see you again. I hate the look on your face, and you pretend to be sick, and you jump up and down the stairs like a stallion. Trevor turned and waved to his son-in-law. James, let's all go home. The ceremony was over. Lisa rushed after her grandfather. Grandpa, what are you doing? You're the one who asked for this meeting. The aggrieved old man turned around. And you're Lisa. You don't have to come to me anymore. You have a rich grandfather now. You even take care of him. And you've forgotten your way back to me. Trevor got into the car and slammed the car door loudly. His older brother stood in the same spot and desperately shouted, "Well, roll on. We haven't seen each other in 50 years, and we won't see each other again. Lisa, help me into the house. I don't feel well." The girl just burst into tears. "You know I don't work for you anymore. The only thing I can do for you right now is call an ambulance." Lisa rushed past the old man into the house and grabbed her purse. She was crying. "I wanted you two to make up so badly. How about you?" Andrew stood there and blinked his eyes in surprise. "No one has ever called me Gusak in my life." The car with the guests had long ago disappeared from view, and in the distance the figure of a girl who in just a few weeks could change the life of a lonely old man. Andrew still hoped that she would return, but the nurse did not appear. Only late in the evening, he made his way into the house and at the very entrance noticed his cane left by Lisa. The old man picked up the innocent object and brought it down forcefully on his knee. There was a crack that sounded very loud in the evening silence. The old man shouted, turning his eyes toward him, "I've ruined everything, you old jackass. I myself have dreamed of making peace with my brother for so many years." Wendy, by the expression on her husband's daughter's face, realized that the meeting had failed. "I knew it was a stupid idea from the start. My mother, when she was alive, told me in every detail about the conflict that had arisen because of her. I know my father too well to believe in a fairy tale reconciliation." Lisa drank her tea in silence, but after her mother's words, she said confidently, "Mom, I've reconciled them anyway. I don't know how to do it yet, but I'll think of something." Wendy sighed. "Oh, I don't know, daughter. For so many years, they've been basically complete strangers. And on the other hand, by the old age, everyone has a desire to be closer to their native roots, and they have such a thing for each other. I sometimes think, the bad character of my father and now Andrew, it's in their genes, or maybe they're just afraid to be good." That's when James stepped in. "You women love to find an explanation for everything. I mean, think about how they were when they were young. And all we know is what your father told Wendy. And no one listened to Andrew's side of the story. It's entirely possible that it's a different one. And it's only by putting one on top of the other that we can finally figure out who's right and who's wrong." Wendy looked at her husband thoughtfully. "James, do you think after all these years it matters anymore?" Did he wave his hand? "Honestly, I'm not sure of anything myself. But I understand our daughter has your family's stubborn streak, and she won't give up. So we have to start somewhere." Lisa put the mug down. "Mom, Dad's right. And you're right when you say that if you don't understand something, you should go to Dad." James looked at his wife gratefully and smiled. "Daughter, can you count on me? If I can do anything, I will help you." Lisa decided to give Adrian and Grandpa a few days to pine away. First on her list was Andrew. She figured she'd have time to figure out what to say to him, how to get him to open up. Adriana met her at the doorstep. "Lisa, what's wrong?" "What do you mean?" "Well, you're supposed to be at Andrew's." Lisa smiled. "What, did you call and complain already?" "No, but I'm just surprised to see you here." "Adriana, I won't go to him anymore." "You don't have to talk me into it." But Lisa, the girl, almost interrupted her. "I'm sure he won't ask for a nurse again. If anything, Grandpa is quite still alive, and believe me, he runs faster than I do." Adriana exclaimed, "What the hell happened? Oh my God, I'm in so much trouble." Lisa didn't have time to answer. "How did Mom hear what happened again?" "Can you hear you in the next ward? I won't believe that Lisa's smart, kind girl upset you so much." Lisa turned around abruptly and froze. Rob was approaching them with a smile. Adriana quickly turned around and then threw herself at her son. "How many times have I asked you to call me by my middle name at work?" Rob smiled even wider. "Excuse me, Adriana, may I ask what I've upset you about, Lisa?" The woman looked at Lisa in surprise. "Do you two know each other? Aren't you the beautiful Lisa I've heard so much about?" Lisa blushed instantly and shrugged her shoulders. "Adriana, the young people followed me. They entered some kind of office, and the nurse closed the door behind them. Rob, maybe Lisa will listen to you and go back to Andrew." "Who's Andrew?" "It's a long explanation. One very elderly and very cranky patient." Rob turned to Lisa. "Lisa, why are you hurting patients?" Lisa laughed involuntarily. So funny was Rob's tone. She drew in more air. "I can't go back to him, because we had a fight, not as caregiver and patient, but as granddaughter and grandfather. The thing is, Andrew turns out my grandfather is really my great-uncle." Adriana shook his head. "I don't understand. What granddaughter?" "Oh, it's such a long story. My grandfather and Andrew. They fought when they were young. Now they're both old people, and they both miss each other. But they are so stubborn that even at the meeting we arranged for them, they manage to immediately fight, call each other names, and then part as enemies again. I think they should make up. They don't have much time in this world. And their bad temper is just a consequence of fighting. You should see them together like two sheep with their horns locked together and no place else to go. Rob chuckled. That's quite a story. How long have they been estranged? For over 50 years. Adriana waved her hand. Doesn't that remind you of anything? I'm sure there's a woman involved in their case, just like ours involves a man. Anyway, that's Lisa. I'm going to draw up a new schedule now. Let's hope your ward doesn't alert the whole city. And if he does, we'll be on the defensive. Lisa changed her clothes and went out. She had already seen Lola sitting at the reception desk with an important look and not reacting to the patients asking her anything. She was concentrating on the scenery outside the window. Lisa did not interfere with the work process because she herself had things to do. But they had to cross paths again. And in the most unexpected way, they ran into each other in the doorway when they went out after work. But the most interesting thing was not that. Max and Rob were waiting outside. Lola walked over to Max and glanced at Rob, but he just turned away and smiled at Lisa. What are you up to? Let's go. He put his arm around her shoulders and dragged her away from the hospital porch. Lisa walked at first, then indignantly threw off his arm. If you're showing off, passed from Max. There was so much surprise in Rob's gaze that Lisa immediately felt ashamed. I'm sorry, Rob. What are you? I'm totally, he exhaled. Okay, never mind. I have an idea to reconcile your grandfathers. If you have time, let's go to the park. I'll tell you. Lisa looked at the time. Mom's gonna be worried. Lisa really didn't want to upset her or Dad right now. Recent events had somehow brought them very close together. She looked at Rob. Look, why don't we go over there and we can talk? Rob looked at her in surprise. And how would you introduce me? Lisa smiled. She wasn't at all sure she was doing the right thing. She didn't know how her mom would take it. But there was no other way. I'll introduce you as a friend to a coworker. James paced from corner to corner. I don't know. I think it's a completely crazy idea. And if it doesn't work out, do you realize that this will be the end of it? Lisa nodded that in our case, the end would be a return to the way things were before. That is, they just won't remember each other at all. James raised his glasses to his forehead, looking at his daughter. So I take it you're already on board. Dad hasn't yet. But Rob makes a good point. Such a strong quarrel by traditional methods. Not calm down. You need some kind of emotional outburst. Wendy poured tea, Rob. But darling, they're very old. What if the heart can't take it? Mom, we need to get someone to tell them I've been hit by a car. Someone who can watch me, give me a shot. But I think grandpas are a lot stronger than they realize. James sighed. Well, let's give it a try, shall we? Rob, you tell me what you decide about the performance chamber. Rob waved his head contentedly. Yeah, Mom will help. Wendy said we'd better not be enemies with the grandfathers. They'll find out it's not true. They won't forgive us. Lisa replied, we won't say we lied. It's just a strong body. That's why she got better. Or were you sent home for treatment? Rob raised his hand. By the way, the second option is a win-win. Elderly people will have a chance to scold medicine and take care of Lisa together. We just need to get it all mapped out, calculated. I set up some kind of accident for Lisa. It's a deal. In 3 days, Lisa had to visit one and the other grandfather before, so to speak, to set up bridges. Trevor met his granddaughter with a guilty look. Forgive us, old fools. But I guess we'll live out our lives one by one. But don't take offense. Come back often. Lisa hugged her grandfather, saying she'd never leave him. Trevor even wept. She was leaving. It's a bit of a nerve-wracking feeling. It doesn't make sense. It could be that Mom's right, and they're doing this for nothing. They're old people, after all. But after a little thought, she decided that she would not abandon the plan. They were all sure the grandfathers would make up. At her hospital bed, which Lisa finds herself in after a car accident that won't really happen. The next day, she has to visit Andrew. Lisa was working and thinking about what Lisa will be talking to him about. She was surprised to see Max walking towards her. "Max, Lisa, I want to invite you to a movie tonight." The girl looked at him in surprise. "But what about Lola? What about Lola? She's dumb as a cork." "I'm sorry, Max, but I can't." Lisa turned away, considering the question exhausted. And then she met the angry stare of Allah, who was standing outside the door. And of course, she heard everything. Max kept up. "Listen, you can't do it today. Let's do it tomorrow." Lisa turned to him. Max was smiling. "Max, answer me one question. Who are you trying to hurt right now, Lola or Rob?" Max's kind, naive eyes narrowed a moment ago. "Aren't you a little too smart for a regular nurse? A trainee. And I'll answer that I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone." Max turned around and headed for the exit, and Lisa looked where Lola had just stood. She hoped that the girl had heard everything, but she was not there. Rob was sitting by Lisa's parents. "I don't understand what's taking so long. It'll be dark soon. How is she going to get home?" James looked at Rob and smiled. He really liked the guy. Wendy Travers seemed to like him, too. "Maybe I should call her after all." "Wendy's got the phone. I'll call her. I'm a mom after all. It won't raise any suspicions." Wendy dialed the number. She listened for a long time. "I don't get it." No answer. Rob said maybe the phone's in her purse and she's somewhere in the rooms. "You know what? I'm gonna go to her place. She's probably forgotten it's time to put the plan in motion." James was getting worried. "You're probably right. Call her right away." "I will." Rob drove up to Andrew's house. It was strangely quiet, and even the gate was closed. He parked, went to the gate, stood for a while, dialed Lisa, but the receiver was now switched off. Rob resolutely pressed the call button. The gate opened, and an elderly woman stood behind it. "Hello. Hello. Can I speak to Lisa?" "But Lisa hasn't come to see us for days." Rob felt a chill run down her spine. "That can't be. She was on her way to your house around 5 o'clock today." The woman shrugged. "If you don't believe me, ask Andrew." She headed toward the house, and Rob followed her. He really hoped the lady hadn't seen Lisa arrive, although that was very unlikely. Andrew was sitting at the table. "Who else is there?" He looked unhappily at the housekeeper, then at Rob. The young man spoke up. "The thing is, Lisa was supposed to go to your place after work today. But I understand she didn't get to you. Her phone is off. What the hell is going on?" The old man's eyebrows went up at me. "But he's up at work, Rob tapped himself on the forehead. "No, I'm going to call my mom now." He quickly pulled out his phone, talked over something, and turned confusedly to Andrew. "Mom says she left on time and was in a big hurry. She said the old man went to Grandpa's house because she wasn't like those girls who just disappear without warning. That's for sure. Well, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to her parents." Andrew stood up. "And I didn't argue with you." Rob wasn't going to argue, of course, though he wanted to say a few words to the old man. They're the reason something's going on with his brother. Wendy looked at Rob in surprise, then at Andrew. She looked out on the landing. "Where's Lisa?" Rob looked at her in silence and didn't know how to tell her. "Wendy, don't worry. I'm sure there's an explanation for everything. For example, Lisa's phone just died, and she had to go somewhere urgently." The woman slowly sat down on the couch. "Lisa is very careful about everything. She can't have a dead phone. If it goes out somewhere, she always warns you. I take it she wasn't at your place today." Wendy looked at Andrew. "No, she wasn't. I was going to go over there myself to apologize. The girl worked so hard, and we're two old fools." Wendy wrapped her arms around her head. "She's gone. It's been over 5 hours. We have to go to the police." It's the first time James has raised his voice. "At the police, no one will take a statement right away. We have to wait until 3 days have passed. Wendy exclaimed. James, 3 days? What are you saying? The man stood up resolutely. So Rob and I are going to the hospital now. Ask there if Lisa said anything or if anyone saw her come out. Andrew got up, and I had a fit. Will you, kind uncle, wait here? I don't want anything to happen to you. You're making a mess of things. Grown men. Could it be because of you, Lisa? Andrew sat down silently. Wendy's right. But peace, my brothers. Let me not give it to you. It was not enough to spoil it. At that moment the phone rang. Wendy wiped her tears and grabbed the phone. Oh my God. Speak of the devil. It's Dad. What are you doing up? There's so much time. Wendy, don't yell at your father. You don't want to talk to an old, useless man. Get my granddaughter. I'll talk to her. Wendy wanted to say something, but she couldn't. Wendy cried. Wendy, what's wrong? Talk fast. I wonder why I can't sleep. Wendy. Andrew took the phone from Wendy Trevor's hands. Hey, Trevor, what are you doing there? You're trying to take over my family. Shut up, Trevor, and listen. Lisa's gone. The phone went silent. Andrew impatiently said, Are you deaf or what? As disappeared, Trevor's voice sounded muffled. So gone. While I was thinking how to make us up. While I was running to you. And she's gone. My son-in-law, where? Where and who knows where? They're looking for him. This guy Rob is with him. He's looking for him too. I'll be there soon. What are you coming in? You old fool. Or did you buy a car? That's not your concern. And don't forget you're older. That makes you even more of a fool. The phone buzzed briefly. Wendy looked at Andrew. Well, he'll be here in a minute, she said. Where's he coming? What's the old man driving? Wendy shrugged. Trevor, meanwhile, was dialing the number of the cab. He found it in an ad in the paper. After talking to the girl and explaining everything about where he lived, he began to pack a bag. It is necessary to put all the necessary thermos, flashlight, clothes, find warmer. He put everything that he thought would be useful. Adriana, Rob and James, all of them realized that they would not learn anything new. They already wanted to go coming the route Lisa was supposed to take. As one ambulance driver remembered, I don't know if this information will be helpful to you. A guy came in for the day. Second intern with him all the time. Anyway, he was kind of hitting on Lisa, and the second intern heard her hiding behind the door over there. She didn't see me. I was just going into the gallery to get some boiling water for tea. Rob immediately grabbed the phone. He called, then called again until he got an answer. Max, you bastard, where are you? Did you even know how? Why the hell are you calling me? You're yelling at me at a time like this. Rob tried not to yell, but he wasn't very good at it. I'm not just gonna yell. I'm gonna interrupt you. Do you understand me? Where's Lisa? Or are you gonna answer me right away? Or I'm gonna find you right now. Max laughed. Rob, have you been drinking in there? How should I know? Where's your Lisa? Max, I'm not in the mood for jokes. I don't understand. Are you serious? Did something happen? Rob realized that his brother, no matter how bad he was, would never dare to do anything bad for which he would have to be held responsible. So I asked, Max, when was the last time you saw her? This afternoon. I tried to ask her out. I confess, you have. I thought about taking her off your hands. But she wouldn't even listen. I'm so sick of it. She's the dumbest person I've ever seen. So I tried to ask Lisa out. I never saw her again. I left right away. Hello, is she with you? Can I talk to her? I'm afraid I can't. She called about 4 o'clock. I told her it was over between us. She was screaming. Rob, where are you? Do you need any help? We can handle it. He disconnected, looked at James Isaac. We need to look for Lola, but we need to look the right way. We'll split up. I don't even know. Maybe we'll go through first. Okay, let's. They left the hospital and stopped on the street. There were two grandfathers waiting for them. Behind them stood Wendy. She looked questioningly at James, but he shook his head negatively. The woman immediately turned away to wipe away her tears. "What are you doing here?" Trevor glanced glumly at his son-in-law. "Were you inspecting the road?" "No, we didn't have time." "We'll go now." "We had to go first." The grandfathers took the flashlights in their hands. Trevor handed his rucksack to Rob, and they moved away from the hospital. Or from behind the door banged tiredly on the door and sank tiredly to the floor. He was wet, floppy, cold. But the girl didn't care. She even suspected there were rats, but it wasn't scary anymore. It was only the first hour or two when she hurried to Andrew. Lola got in her way. "Lisa, we need to talk." "Lola, let's do it next time." "What's wrong with you?" "Let's go behind the bushes. There's a bench behind the bushes, not just to talk." "We need to talk." Lisa sighed. It was the first time she had seen Lola talking normally. "If you're about Max, no, or because the conversation has nothing to do with him." "Well, okay. Just for a little while. I'm in a big hurry." Sure enough, they wrapped up behind the bushes. Lisa saw no bench, only a dilapidated house. Apparently, it had already been vacated for demolition, and it looked terrifying. "Where's the bench?" "A little further ahead." Lola followed behind on the narrow path. As soon as they appeared at the entrance to the cellar, Lola pushed her hard in the back, and Lisa literally rolled down. The girl shoved her until Lisa regained her senses into the basement room and closed the door. Lisa, when she heard Lola putting the lock on, screamed, "Lola, what are you doing? You're out of your mind. You're the one who's crazy. What the hell are you doing? Always getting in my way. Now sit there until you die. Lola, you're going to jail. Let me out. No one will ever find you." "Got it." Lisa started going through her pockets, but the bag and the phone must have stayed in front of the door. "Hello? Hello, open up. They'll find me anyway." Lisa heard some rustling. Then she listened again and realized that Lola was piling some branches or other debris in the entrance. The girl started pounding on the door in desperation. "Lola, I beg you." But there was silence outside. Lisa pounded on the door with her hands, then her feet. She screamed when her voice was gone. She pounded on the door again with her feet, realizing with horror that no one was walking past the structure. That's where the police came in. She chased some alkies to homeless people. If they heard her, it was unclear whether it would be better. It was pitch black in the basement. There was a tiny crack in one side of the door, and it glowed slightly. When the glow disappeared, Lisa realized that it was dark outside. She sat on the floor and occasionally knocked on the door with her removed shoe. "What's in here?" "Nothing. A wasteland." "What wasteland with his house in sight?" Trevor pointed the beam at the house. "It's not a house. No one lives there anymore." James shuddered. "No, she can't be there." Wendy cried. Trevor turned to her. "But what's the baby saying? And what's the baby saying?" Andrew supported his brother for the first time. "There's no need to cry." "Not why. As long as nothing has happened, nothing will happen." Rob went forward, and the old men lit the way. Rob thought that's what the old guard was all about, and their flashlights and backpacks were obviously useful. They walked around the house. Rob said nothing, no sign of anything, and even the basement was filled with trash. Andrew approached the opening to the basement. He looked there for a long time, then called Trevor over. They talked about something and Trevor ordered them to dismantle. James answered, "I can take it apart, of course. But you can see that it's empty, and we will only waste time empty. You say, look how the grass is taken. So they've been carrying garbage here recently, and the grass hasn't grown yet. It takes 24 hours for the grass to come up, you know." Rob was already spreading out the trash. James joined him. Trevor raised his hand when half of it had been cleared, but silently everyone stopped. Faint thumps were heard from below. "Lisa." Rob started up with redoubled energy. Wendy looked down in horror. "The lock here is a healthy lock." Trevor told Andrew about the light. He pulled a knife out of his backpack, did some more picking, and the lock opened. Rob tore the door open, and Lisa fell at their feet, who, as soon as she heard the sounds, stood pressed against the door and whispered help. The voice was gone. It had been missing for hours. Wendy rushed downstairs. "Lisa, Lisa, you're all right." They didn't get home until the morning. "Daddy, Uncle Andrew, I'll style your room for you." Trevor looked at his daughter, then at Andrew. "My brother and I are going to go to his place, if that's okay with him. He seems to have more room. We'll talk about everything." Andrew nodded his head in agreement. "Yes." James stood up. "I'll take you." Wendy saw the men off and went to pack a bag. Lisa had been left at the hospital. We had to take things, and then to the police. Lisa is squinting in the sun. She spent 24 hours in the hospital. They took some tests, gave her pills, and Lisa slept for 24 hours. Now her mom called, said they were waiting for her downstairs. The doctor gave her the certificate, told her to be careful. She went down the stairs and thought that, as it turned out, it was so great to live that it was impossible to tell. And if she could still get to try on her grandfather's. Lisa knew that Lola had been taken to the police and that sort of even Max had gone there. Probably realized it was all for him. But I didn't want to think about the ball. I didn't want to forgive or be angry. That's all. She was only a few steps away from the ball when Rob rushed up to meet her. Lisa blushed immediately. She remembered him stroking her cheek, her arm. When she'd been found, she hadn't cared then. Now she thought that everyone had seen it. She'd lost consciousness almost immediately. Like the doctor said, the shock of being found was worse than the shock of being hidden in the basement. "Lisa, how are you?" Did he put his arm around her? Or did you lock yourself away from her all right? "Thank you. You're welcome. It's the grandfathers. The grandfathers. Why does he talk about them? As if they were one and the same." Lisa followed his gaze and saw the grandfathers. They were standing off to the side, talking peacefully. Lisa even lost her eyes. No, they're really standing there, talking, even laughing. "Rob, did they make up?" "They totally made up. And it's all thanks to you." Lisa fell into the arms of Mom, then Dad, then Grandpa. She was smiling. She couldn't believe that these two old people were really talking, smiling, and no one wanted to kill anyone, already at home at the set table. When Rob and Lisa talked about how they were going to set it up, as if the girl had been in an accident, Trevor looked at Andrew and stood up. Andrew stood up after him as well. "We apologize. We want to apologize to you, Lisa. If it wasn't for you, we'd be dead." Lisa hugged them and then signaled Rob to go out on the balcony. She looked so mysterious that Rob was immediately worried. Oh, this was not good. They went out on the balcony, looked down at the kids playing on the playground for a while. Then Lisa turned sharply to Rob. "You know, I've got a cool idea for reconciling Grandpa Andrew and his son." Rob realized that his fears were justified. Lisa's eyes were sparkling. She was ready to rush back into the fray. He grabbed her arm and literally dragged her into the room. "Just a moment, everyone. Our Lisa, who almost died yesterday, announces a new adventure. Andrew Saveleaf's reconciliation with his son. I think something should be done about it." Andrew stood up, smiled. "I called the kids yesterday. They'll be here by this evening." Lisa clapped his hands together, but Rob raised his hand again. "It's not all about watching Lisa. I realized she needed constant supervision. That's why everyone froze." He turned to the girl, who was looking at him with huge eyes. "That's why I'm asking for Lisa's hand in marriage. As a husband, it will be much more convenient for me to keep her away from all sorts of detective stories." Wendy cried at once. The old men murmured approvingly. They liked Rob right away. James put his arm around his wife. "Come on. There's no need to cry. Rob will take good care of our daughter." Rob looked at Lisa carefully. "What do you think?" Lisa snuggled up to him. "What can I say? The two of us can do so much more." Rob grabbed her and surrounded her. Everyone present laughed at the girl's words.